You are now tuned in to the Lineman Lounge, the world's thickest sports podcast, with your hosts, Mike and Evo.
Come on, Stan, bitches. This is the Lineman Lounge. I am Mike. That is Evo. It is Sunday. We are in between the Super Bowl and our conference championships, Pro Bowl games. All of that stuff is going on, but we are going to bring you Mock Draft 1.0 from the Lineman Lounge today. I'm very excited. I have been crushing out a shitload of mock drafts over the last couple of days, but my guy, Evo, I'm pumped. We got some big names, big picks to make. A lot of controversy about potential guys that can go in the top 10, top 5, in the top 2 for sure. I know people in Cleveland are talking about potential names at that number 2 spot. A lot of different mocks that I have seen have a lot of different names in that spot. I'm going to make that pick today. But my man, how you doing? Welcome in. Saw you on Wednesday. Back to another Sunday show. We're going to have to figure out the model going forward for next week as we get into the Super Bowl. But it's good to see you, brother. How you doing?
Yeah, it's good to see you too, man. It is nice to be back. We're, not gonna have to operate around me traveling as much, hopefully, here for the super near future. So that'll make things a little bit easier. But with that, we are getting down to the end of the season. We are in that mid week, right in between championship games and the Super Bowl. So we have that week off. Pro Bowl games are going on probably now. I know they've been doing all sorts of Pro Bowl events and stuff like that. In addition to Reese's Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl and stuff that was going on. A lot of information coming up from there that is starting to actually affect some of these mock drafts. Places like PFF and all these scouting sites are starting to really assimilate their boards and start to rank guys a lot more. So that's changing not only their perspective, but the public perspective, because let's be real, like you and I, we are football fanatics and we like it in the draft season, but there is, hundreds of players that go into these drafts. So it is very tough for the layman to know these names, to watch film, okay, YouTube and stuff like that on these guys and things like that. It's difficult to do. So we're still catching up with it. The pros are still catching up with it. Like the guys who make their money off of doing this stuff and putting out content are still catching up. So, we're all in that same kind of boat together, but we're going to make an attempt at a nice mock draft here with the information that we have available to us and the time that we have put into it so far. Because I've been putting in a decent amount of time too. I know that if you were to ask Hannah, how she likes watching mock drafts or waking up to mock drafts going on in the middle of the night and stuff like that, she'll get pretty heated about it probably at this point, because she's always like, why are we watching this fucking bullshit? She's so used to seeing the PFF mock draft simulator scene that I'm pretty sure she hates it right
now. So producer Amber was kind of getting more involved, trying to understand more about the draft process, because she admittedly hates this time of the content schedule, because it doesn't pique her interest. She wants to gamble. She wants to talk about the football. But we love this stuff. We love diving into it. Senior Bowl. I love trying to catch one of those grainy videos like, oh man, it looks good in this rep. Good in this rep, because that's what we have, right? Luckily, on this show, we like to try to inject a little humor, comedy, as well as trying to give you as much information about these football guys as we can. And producer Amber was kind of getting into weeds a little bit about, man, I'm looking at everybody else's mocks. I'm running these mocks. I'm making one pick. I'm seeing what everybody else does, and I'm picking for different teams one time to see what everybody else does around it, trying to play out different scenarios. Okay, I'm taking Cam first. I'm taking Shadur first. What does the board look like if these things fall this way? It's a fun process, but if you're not into it, it can be tough at times. I think the ladies probably are starting to understand that.
Yeah, for sure. But look, the Senior Bowl, I think every year becomes more and more accessible to the more common fan. I think a lot of why you and I probably are big fans of the off season isn't just because we're passionate football fans and fans of our football teams and we want to see our teams grow each year, but we also are truly from that Madden generation where manipulating your team is something that you're doing on a week-to-week basis in the game. And so you want to play that role of GM a little bit. And so the off season is where you're starting to get your Madden mind going. And it's a fun time for us. Vanilla Gorilla, good to see you. Good morning to you, big dog. Hope you are doing well wherever you are running around in the world doing gorilla things. But yeah, it makes it fun for me. And look, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. We're not at this point yet in the show, I don't think, but the Senior Bowl practices are open to the public. I feel
dude,
we got to make a trip down to Mobile.
Listen, we got our next year, potentially a lot of things on the docket. I know that the Vikings are coming out to Cleveland, or so we think. We are hosting a game. Now, we don't know where. Are you guys slated to play a London game?
I don't think so, because we have been playing so many games overseas. I don't think we're slated for one as of right now this upcoming season. But I mean, the Vikings have been one of those teams because of the Scandinavian Viking route type thing. I think that's one of the reasons why the NFL has pulled the Vikings into that market so much, is that, you know, it's easy to build a fan base if they have, you know, a similar style mascot to the culture around there. So I fully expect that they're going to continue doing those overseas games a lot more with the Vikings. You know, now they're adding Germany and Madrid, I believe, and things like that. So, but I expect those to happen. I just don't know that we got one coming up this next season.
Okay. Well, because the Browns are supposed to host the Vikings. The Browns are also supposed to go to London this year. I don't know if we are the home team or not. Producer and Amber and I have talked about the possibility of trying to make it out to the London game, just as a vacation for the two of us, and enjoy, you know, going to a different country and maybe shooting some content. But also, as long as the Vikings and the Browns are not playing in London, we're going to try to do a podcast from the Muni lot when that game happens, and that's going to be a lot of fucking fun.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, any way that we can start getting into some of that stuff, especially in the off season, because look, be completely honest with everyone watching the show. The time between, you know, the Super Bowl and the beginning of the season, that can be a bit of a dead time for a lot of content creators that are solely focused on football. We aren't solely focused on football here, but it is a lot of what we do. Now, the NFL does a good job of breaking up the offseason and making fun events and different timelines and stuff like that. But still, to be able to get out there on the ground at some of these events, like the pinnacle for me would be getting to go to the scouting combine, which is definitely closed off. But I mean, like, that would be a very, very cool thing to do, something that I would love to do, and be able to produce content for you, the viewers, and then just personally to be able to be there would be outstanding. It'd be really cool. But I think that dipping the toe in the water, one of those opportunities would be getting out to Mobile and checking out the Senior Bowl.
I'm absolutely down. And I know a guy in the area who has an RV we could use.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, look, that's the thing, is that it's not just going to the Senior Bowl itself, but all the GMs, all the execs, all the front office personnel, the head coaches, they apparently just go out and rub shoulders with everybody at the local establishments every evening. And so you hear this for all the time from content creators. Oh yeah, I was sitting next to John Schneider on my plane ride out, and oh yeah, I ran into this GM having a drink at the bar, and I'm just sitting close by and listening to these scouts talking about these players, and that's how I have some of this more intimate knowledge on some of these guys, the way that they discuss certain players, which is some of the stuff that gets put onto their content that we're going to probably relay to you some of that today while we do our mock draft. And to be actually there, hear it firsthand, then we're not having to play the telephone game. We could be like, hey, the Lineman Lounge was on ground at Mobile, Alabama, and I heard a AFC West GM talking about this quarterback or something like that. That'd be some cool shit.
Put it on the list, bro. Let's do it next year. I'm in.
I would love to do it. Alrighty.
I'm in. I'm 100% in. But we had some guys made some big splash plays for themselves at the Senior Bowl. A couple guys that really did some good things for themselves. And like the story that I think everybody loves, wide receiver out of TCU. I mean,
it's tough to say that everyone loves a story. It is a good story, a sad story, but it has a little bit of a happier ending. But keep going.
But I mean, so when you lose a family member to a devastating act, a terrorist attack, And then you go out. I mean, this kid, decent prospect, but he made himself a shitload of money this week at the Senior Bowl. Performed well all week in drills, performs excellent in the game, catches the game winning touchdown, is named MVP, has that moment with his family on the field. That was really special. That's a cool moment. Even the coaches were talking about it. You go back and you listen to the reporters, hear the reports. The coaches loved this story for this guy.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
And it's Jim Nagy that runs the Senior Bowl, Reese Senior Bowl. I had heard them talking about, he was I believe was on Sirius radio talking with some of the guys in there about prospects that they like coming into Senior Bowl before everything started. And one of the names that he brought up was Jack Besh, who's that TCU wide receiver. And he was saying not only is he a good prospect, the guy that we wanted to bring in, but the story right now is important to us because his older brother Tiger, who was a receiver return specialist at the Ivy League school, Princeton. He was there in Louisiana, died because of that terrorist attack, like you brought up, on January 1st. And so, just a month later, basically, Jack is here in the Senior Bowl playing in his, brother's footsteps. And was able to, get a touchdown. You see that touchdown that he gets, and it's everybody's on the field, dapping him up, patting him, feeling for him, because of what him and his family have gone through. He talks about how his brother was giving him wings that day. Jack Besh was already looked at as probably like a fringe day 2 type player, but because of his size, speed, measurables that he has, and the performance that he put on during the Senior Bowl week, he elevated himself to a guy that's being talked about even in the second round at some points, because it's not like a super, super deep wide receiver class. And it's a different wide receiver class. I mean, we're going to get into a little bit of this where it's like, it's less about, in the past couple of years, it's been really small kind of gadgety type of guys. There's a lot more guys that are more that 6'1" type range or bigger. And he's one of those guys. I believe he's 6'2", and he definitely made himself some money in the Senior Bowl weekend. But like the story, unfortunately, for that happening did kind of propel him a little bit more in the limelight and probably drew more eyes to him. And then on top of that, it wasn't just like a fluke, like, oh, he did some good things. Like he performed well this week, enough for scouts to be like, okay, this isn't a guy that we just want to bring in because there's a PR thing with it. Like he's a legitimately good player. He won the Senior Bowl MVP. And so it was really cool getting to see him and his family have that moment on the sidelines, on the field, and in remembrance of his brother, who, obviously was lost just a month ago.
Yeah. Sad story, but kind of an inspirational one as he moves forward and chases after his dream. Great week for that, for the young man. Any other news stories that we want to hit on? I mean, obviously we had the Senior Bowl. We have Pro Bowl games have kind of been going on. The dodgeball. Dodgeball is always fun. Any of that stuff that you feel that we need to hit on for the people before we start diving into this mock draft?
Yeah, like we're still waiting on the one head coach, and again, we think that is probably going to wait until after the Super Bowl is done, because the Saints are looking at offensive coordinator Kellen Moore for the Eagles. That looks like he's their prime target. The shitty part for them is they don't know, I guess, for sure if Kellen Moore really wants to take this job or not. I guess the rumors are Kellen Moore really coveted that Dallas job from the time that he was there and didn't get it. And now he had another loop at it and they didn't select him again or try to offer him the job. And so this might be like, hey, I'm going to take this other NFC job here and try to get back at you. Maybe, I don't know. I have my thoughts about Kellen Moore. I don't know that he's in the right spot to be a head coach in the NFL, especially not with the Saints team, but we're still waiting on that. So that actually filters into our mock draft a little bit. It's tough to make selections for the Saints other than purely looking at these are positional needs that they have, but it is tough to schematically fit needs and stuff like that into that team as easy. Other than that, I mean, we did have a couple big hires. The Bears are bringing in some decent staff members, including Eric Bieniemy, a guy that we've talked about a lot on this show. Bieniemy is coming in as the running backs coach there for Ben Johnson with the Bears. Bieniemy obviously was with the Chiefs for years, went to Washington, did some good things there, and he's been looked at a lot of times as being this possible head coach candidate. Now he makes the jump from UCLA back into the NFL. and for all intents and purposes has been a very good positional coach and a good offensive coordinator in the league. Is this going to be the step that's necessary in order to get him into a head coaching role in future years? We'll see there. Either way, the Bears and Ben Johnson are filling out what looks to be a pretty solid coaching staff up there in Chicago. And then there's a prospective kicker for you guys next year in Justin Tucker.
No, don't do that. We're not. Here's the thing. I'm going to keep the same energy with Justin Tucker as I had for Deshaun Watson. They need to cut him immediately. They need to cut him.
Yeah. For those who may not know, Justin Tucker has received a whole bunch of allegations. I believe we're at 9 or more.
I think that's been added.
Massage therapists who, because it was originally 6, and then I know another 3 got added, and I don't know if there's more since then, but who have made claims about him doing inappropriate actions with these massage therapists. Justin Tucker obviously has come out and said, no, nothing has happened. This is all a smear campaign.
Says that.
Interesting though, because he's a kicker, obviously one of the most notable kickers in the NFL over the past decade or so, at least. He had a down year this last year. Maybe some massage therapists were angry at him for not kicking as well this year. I don't know.
Maybe they're all lying.
Yeah,
maybe because his contract was bad for the team and he wasn't performing well enough, that they have some sort of evil cabal that is lying about Justin Tucker. Because that's what the same fucking story was about Deshaun Watson. Cut him.
This is the thing, is that I think it is ultimately going to result in the Ravens cutting him and being done with him. Again, we are not legal experts. We are not the police or anything like that. It is tough to pass judgment. I can see arguments on both sides, how it could be true, it couldn't be true. Look, the groundwork has been laid because of your quarterback and the situation there, where, if it worked this time, it could work a second time. If maybe there is this cabal that you speak of who's going after him, trying to get money. It's interesting. Why would you go after a kicker who, while this particular kicker has made pretty good money in his career, in the grand scheme of football, they are one of the lower contract values. You'd think you'd go after someone who gets a little more money if you were just out for the money. Either way, it's a story to watch. It is interestingly similar to what happened with Deshaun Watson. But it is fun to meme about with your Cleveland Browns, and how you guys, I keep on hearing the stuff thrown around about how Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings are quarterback rehab. Are the Browns sexual assault rehab university?
What have we rehabbed?
Not a goddamn thing. It is just
not a goddamn thing.
It's a halfway house for whores. I don't know. It's rough. But yeah, a lot of positional coach hirings are going on around the league. If I try to keep up to track with those as much as possible, post the notifications of those on the Lineman Lounge Facebook page. You can see that down on our little bar below. If you want to go check any of that information out, you can check us out on X, Facebook, on the TikTok with some of our short form content. The call line is open today, I believe, if you have thoughts about this mock draft that we're about to get into. And then, of course, the YouTube page you can see listed there. If you would take the time to go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, we would truly appreciate that. Kind of boost our content a little bit if you enjoy what you're seeing here. And give us your thoughts on this draft as we go through it. Comment, go ahead, call in if you feel the vitriol towards your team's pick, or if you really have an idea of where you want us to go with your team. If you're watching, call in, let us know, give us your thoughts, because right now we don't want to be an echo chamber of just Mike and I talking here. Like if you have thoughts about your team, put it out there, because we want to take in that information.
Yeah, I would hope that we're going to get a little bit of interaction here as this thing kicks off. Browns picking second. Because of that, this mock draft will be you starting first, picking 1 overall for the Titans. I will pick 2. When we get to 24, we're going to make a swap because I will go all evens, but you're going to get to pick for the Vikings at 24. So I will take the Packers at right 24. Before. That way there's no fucking funny business.
Absolutely.
when
And
the Packers select, even though that they will probably select somebody incredibly stupid in the first round anyways.
It's possible. It is definitely possible with Gutekunst. That's you hear this from Packers fans a lot too. Like they hate Gutekunst picks. They tend to turn out to be like decent to average role players and stuff like that, but not worth necessarily the first round pick. And that the Packers fans, I think, is a little bit of copium. They're like, you just have to trust the process. Like he knows what he's doing. He's not going to get us a bad player, but he's also not going to get us the flashy guy that we kind of want. I get that, but either way, so Mike's starting to go over some of the ground rules here for this mock draft. I'm going to be picking odds. Mike's going to be picking evens. Obviously, that allows him to select there for his Cleveland Browns. And when we get to pick 23, he's going to pick for the Packers. I will pick for my Vikings at 24. This is a no trade mock because once we start getting into trades, that's things, funny business starts happening. We got to pull out trade value charts or just go off of like the PFF mock draft simulator, little bar on the bottom that says, will this go through or not? Which sometimes is close, sometimes isn't. It doesn't factor in desperation of teams, things like that. And it tries to keep things relatively even. And we know in the NFL, trades, especially when it comes to the first round trades, they are not necessarily even because some GMs and people have desperation that go into this. As far as how we make selections for this, Mike, do you want to do what we think will happen or what we would do for these teams?
So I believe that we should go with what we would do. 1.0, we have no idea where these teams are leaning, where they're going. Free agency hasn't happened. So I think we're just going to play this one straight from the hip. If you're picking for them, where are you going? Thing that you like the best for this team.
All righty. And look, some of that is, at least I know for me, and I'll definitely declare this when I make the picks, some of it is going to be both. Like I can't help but lean towards what I think the team will do and have that filter into what I would do as well. But there's some of these teams that I think, we just brought the Packers. I feel like they make bad picks every year for the position that they're in. I think that the players that they get aren't necessarily terrible players, but I think the value is not good. And that's if we were picking like the Packers, that's what would end up happening. That's how we would try to do this draft. Obviously, if you're going to be drafting for the Packers, you should be trying to build their team out as the GM as best as possible. So that's kind of what I'm expecting from you.
Yep, I agree. So, brother, I'm good there. We are picking like we want to improve that team. I'm going to try to improve the Packers. I know that I'm sure you would have done exactly the same thing. Stand-up individual for the Packers, you would have done it. But
hey, look, I've been doing a lot of these mock drafts, and I've been drafting appropriately for the Packers. I think I'm taking players that are worthy of their pick because I don't want to mess up the second part of my mock draft where it's like, oh, now there's extra players that shouldn't be there type thing. Like I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt as much as I hate them. All right, we do already have a comment here from Eric Dunlap. Buffalo Bills need some secondary. We'll see what happens with them down in the second part of this draft. It may or may not be available to them.
But with that, let's see here. Let's kind of get this thing to pop up. All right. Mock draft 1.0. We're going to go ahead and kick this thing officially off. Evo, do you have the siren? Grab the siren, my man. Guys, thank you very much. I know that mock draft 1.0 is officially open. Evo, with the Tennessee Titans, you are officially on the clock. Let's go ahead and get it going.
All righty. So we got the PFF mock draft simulator up here. Understand that these are their rankings that you'll be seeing in average draft positions based off of the way that the users of this mock draft simulator have been drafting. So Tennessee Titans, obviously there's talk with these first three picks and pick number 6 with the Vegas Raiders of who's going to be going after a quarterback. Titans, Browns, Giants, all have a need for quarterback. And obviously there's a lot of link between the Raiders and Shadur Sanders and their need for a quarterback. And here with the Titans, they bring in Borgonzi as their new GM. And he's made statements about how we need to not just focus on quarterback. We need to look at best player available. That's brought a lot of people to thinking like this is considered a weaker quarterback class. And
generational talent is what he said. He would take. He
right.
would not pass up a generational talent.
Right. And I'm not 100% convinced that there is a generational talent in this draft class. I think that there's a decent amount of blue chippers, which are guys that are considered to be, all pro, Pro Bowl type players year in and year out. And that the generational talent, you're talking about those legendary guys who are almost a lock for Hall of Fame. I'm not sure that you have a generational talent in this draft. Like I said, there are blue chippers in here. If there's one person that gets pointed to all the time as the potential generational guy, it's Travis Hunter, right? Because he's that kind of positionless player, both a defensive back and a wide receiver. But you don't know which he is, and you don't know if he's like the elite of the elite at either of those things. Either way, I think that Tennessee is going to end up going quarterback at this position. Like with Callahan there, Levis isn't the answer. Levis wasn't a guy that he drafted or brought in. It wasn't a guy that the new GM there brought in. They have the opportunity to completely wipe the slate clean. It's not like they're foregoing a first round pick. Levis was taken in the second, and he has some tools there that you still like that you could continue to develop as a backup. And if you're able to get something out of them, maybe you trade them in a year or something like that to a desperate team. Either way, they do need to figure out the quarterback position. It's the most position or important position on the football team. Now the question is, does it come down to Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, right? So Cam Ward, more toolsy, more of the mobile threat quarterback. He's looked better every single year that he's played in college. A lot of big plays. Or Shadur Sanders, who seems like the higher floor type of player, but the biggest thing with him is that he seems to take a lot of sacks. He holds onto the ball really long. I've heard some interesting theories about how it might be stat padding that was going there, which is a very highfalutin way to think about how he played his college career. That he would hold on to the ball a lot more and take those sacks rather than throw balls away, because then that counts as an incompletion. Do you give any credence to that at all, Wishader?
No, I don't. I mean, I think there are times he holds on to the ball to try to make a play, which I'd like to see him not do. But do I think he's doing it to pad his stats? No. I mean, that's one of the most asinine things I've ever heard.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same ilk with my thought process. Like maybe Dion is having some like gigabrain thought process when he's training him, being like, "Hey, just go ahead and take the sack. I'd rather you do that." But that doesn't make sense for the actual football team. And
Yeah.
Dion's coaching a football team, and that's something that they need to coach out of him, is how long he holds onto the ball. I do absolutely agree that he has the higher floor of these guys. Cam Ward, I think, could be a special player if put in the right situation. I don't know if the Titans is that right situation. We don't know if Callahan is necessarily good at developing a quarterback. The comments that he's made about Shadur in relation to Joe Burrow, though, and excuse me, obviously Callahan coming from that Bengals organization working with Joe Burrow, I think that he has an idea of what type of quarterback that he wants. He hasn't had the same sort of toolsy quarterback before as he did with Cam Ward. One could say that Will Levis is that toolsy type of guy with a big ass arm and he can run a little bit, and that didn't necessarily work out. I think that he's going to lean more towards Shadur, so I'm going Shadur Sanders in this spot. I think
Wow.
that high floor for the Titans, coupled with they already have a pretty solid offensive line there. They've got a Calvin Ridley type there. Who knows if they're going to bring back Westbrook or Kine or not as another wide receiving option, but they want to solidify one side of the ball. I think they have a lot more holes on the defensive side of the ball, but they've got some pieces on offense already. Let's go ahead and lean into the offense and then work on defense later in this draft, free agency, and in years future. But Shadur Sanders going number one overall, exactly what Dion wants and Shadur wants to the Tennessee Titans.
Okay, so they both want him to go first for sure. I think that I don't know that this will happen. Because I agree with you. I think Shadur has the higher floor, lower ceiling. Cam Ward has the higher ceiling because he's a toolsy guy. There are some holes in Cam's game that you worry about the accuracy. I mean, we have looked at guys who are toolsy, who have maybe not the best ball placement, and they struggle at this level. Uh, I mean, Jordan Love is a great example of that. Where he could go absolutely gangbusters, but it's not guaranteed to happen every week. That's kind of more where I find Cam Ward. Shadur is steady Eddie, but it feels like it's going to be high. I'm not sure if everybody else is on. Executives are going to be in the same mindset. And it is interesting that the comments from the GM that come out and say, "Hey, you know what? We are not going to pass up an opportunity to take a generational guy. If the ceiling is not as high for Shedeur, I would be interesting. It would be interesting to see this move. It changes the way I'm going to make my next pick, though.
Yeah, look, a part of the thought process here is that Callahan might be on a short leash. Bergonzi, I don't know how long his leash is necessarily going to be, but when you look at bringing in one particular player, because if they don't take Shedeur here, they go a different route, non-quarterback. You're looking at probably Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter.
Mhm.
Is Abdul Carter going to, how many more wins per year is he going to provide you? How many more wins is Travis Hunter going to provide you per year?
Yeah.
Less than one, maybe, but bringing in a quarterback that is competent enough to run an offense better than Will Levis, which I think
Levis cost
Shedeur
you at least
Sanders,
2 last year.
and I think Shedeur Sanders has the ability to run an offense well, maybe not again at that, top 15 level, but he right around that 15 mark in his first year. He probably brings you in a couple more wins, and that might be the sort of statistic on a piece of paper that you can go to your owner and say, look, we are making progress where in years past we haven't had that. That's enough to keep your job. And I think that that's going to be a factor for a lot of these teams picking in the top 3 here, top 4.
Whew, all right, yeah. So that puts me, the Browns, on the clock with a guy that I didn't think was going to be there. I thought Cam Ward was going 1 in this draft. And the times that I have run where Shedeur goes first, my immediate thought is I have to take Cam. And I like Shedeur more than I like Cam. I like Shedeur because he's accurate. He is on time, in rhythm type thrower. And that more fits the Stefanski style of offense. That's kind of his bread and butter. But when you have a guy that has this high upside, like really high upside, everybody thinks, and you have been an absolute quarterback hell recently, you're almost forced into doing this. Now, I think that there is a lot of talents in other places. But like you said, how many wins does Travis Hunter bring to Cleveland Browns? And what position does he play? Is he playing wide receiver? Because if that's the case, who the fuck's throwing him the ball? And that, in my opinion, that's where Travis should play. Is mostly at wide receiver and some corner, because you can get the ball in his hands more and have him affect the game in a bigger sense on the offensive side of the ball. Abdul Carter, that's a great piece. Opposite Myles Garrett, that's fantastic. And if for some reason Myles Garrett leaves, you have Abdul Carter to kind of fill in and take his place. But with Cam Ward and the potential that he has, I can't not take him here.
You thinking that
exactly what will happen if anybody but Cam Ward goes first in the draft? I think Cam Ward will go to the Browns.
you think that means that you guys would be punting on any possible opportunity next year at looking at a Manning or something like that in a much better quarterback draft?
It will
Is this a desperation?
Cam sees the field.
Is this a desperation move then for your head coach GM combo?
Yeah, but aren't they kind of in that spot anyways with the way the Deshaun Watson contract worked out and the way the whole roster is now constructed? They kind of have to throw a Hail Mary. And this is their best chance at that Hail Mary. It's going to buy them some time. This really uber talented quarterback that needs some grooming, you'll get a couple of years with that. But if you bring in a Shedeur Sanders, you know the ceiling's only so high. What can you get out of him pretty quickly because his floor is already much higher? That puts a lot more pressure on Barry and Stefanski in my opinion. So if I'm the Browns and Cam Ward's on the board at 2, they're going to take him. They have to take him.
All righty. So that's your pick, Cam Ward?
Cam Ward.
All righty. Well, that makes my pick with the Giants a little bit more difficult because obviously the hope there would be that Cam Ward falls here. Being the more toolsy guy, you have Dable, who has dealt with a toolsy quarterback who had some accuracy concerns and was able to work that out. I think that's a selling point for Dable, is he could get a guy like a Cam Ward in and say, I can build this guy. I did with Josh Allen. It's not going to be immediate. It's not going to be tomorrow, but this is someone that I can work with a little bit more. And now you have those top 2 quarterbacks off the board. And the number 3 quarterback out there is still kind of up in the air. Some people think it's Jalen Milroe, but Jalen Milroe did not do himself any favors at the Senior Bowl. The measurables on his hands, he's like a 6'2" guy, but you're looking at a guy whose hands are less or 9 inches, just like right around. It is tough to grip a football. We've seen some players do that, but a lot of them start to wear gloves, i.e. Kenny Pickett or Teddy Bridgewater. Jalen Milroe for sure has a crazy arm, but he's one of those guys that people like to say he's a little bit more of a running back. And it makes sense with his size.
I know a guy that you like, Jackson Dart, had a good Senior Bowl week as well.
He did.
Coming up the boards a little bit. A guy I like, Kyle McCord, is going to continue to climb, but that's way too high to talk about his fucking name.
Yeah, and I don't know that we're going to see another quarterback here in the first round, but if you are a fan of one of these teams that really needs a quarterback, or you might be looking at a need for a quarterback in a year or two, I think that you do have some decent options in this draft who aren't going to be taken in the first round, which means you are going to be allowed to sit this guy. If you take him in round 2 or 3, you're going to be allowed to sit him for a year or two and let him get better. All right. Let me know if my signal drops out here because I'm seeing the Wi-Fi bar drop on me all of a sudden on the screen. But Jackson Dart looked good at the Senior Bowl. Dylan Gabriel didn't look bad either. Dylan Gabriel proved to a lot of people that he has an arm that they weren't expecting. I think the super easy direct comp for Dylan Gabriel is a Tua Tagovailoa. He's got a really good head between the ears. He's been in a lot of different systems in the NFL.
Played a lot of games.
Or in college football. You're going to look at he's a younger version of what Bo Nix was able to provide. The biggest knock on him is going to be his size. He has that smaller size that Russell Wilson Tua size. He's still a little small in Tua, but honestly, if I'm the Dolphins, I'm looking to draft this guy in round 2 or 3 because Tua, you can't trust his head, like not his brains, but his brain injury problems, like the concussions. And I feel like you could slip a Dylan Gabriel in there and not have much of a drop off and potentially a better player in the long run. Or if you are a team that wants a guy, like if you were given the opportunity today, Mike, to have Tua as your quarterback or Cam Ward, where would you go?
Knowing everything I know, Cam Ward, because I know Tua's got the injury thing.
And you guys don't have an offensive line to protect him. But this is the thing. If you had Tua without the brain injury concerns,
I would take Tua.
Yeah, and that's possibly what you might have in a year or two from a Dylan Gabriel if he starts to peak under NFL coaching and tutelage. That's what I think people could be getting in the second round. And obviously, we're only doing a 1-round mock draft today. Yeah. But for the people who are, concerned about their quarterback situation, or looking for something for the future, Dylan Gabriel's an option out there who I think parallels very well to a Tua Tagovailoa. And then Jackson Dart, I think, has been surprising people a lot. He's been one of my guys that I've been paying attention to in a class where I don't really care about the quarterback too much because I've got my quarterback. But Jackson Dart's a guy who's probably made himself into a second-round pick at this point based off of his ability to run, the arm strength, his production in college. Like, he's done some really good things where I think that this is a guy that you could probably sit for a year or two and you might surprise people and become a pretty solid quarterback in the NFL. So those are guys that I would pay attention to for those future rounds. Obviously not going to get to it today. And the Giants might be one of those teams that goes after a guy like a Dylan Gabriel or Jackson Dart in round 2 because it is not worth the third pick unless they start trading out of it. Now, the question is, where do they go if it's not quarterback? Obviously, they have some tackle concerns along that offensive line and defensive back issues. And I think that's kind of where you have to look is they could use options at wide receiver to go with Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Neighbors, and Travis Hunter could fit into that. Or if you're looking at Travis Hunter as a defensive back, they could use him anywhere along that defensive backfield. I have concerns with Travis Hunter where he actually fits as far as how good is he as a pure cornerback? How good is he as a pure wide receiver? You said that you would want to use him primarily as a wide receiver, correct? And have him moonlight as a defensive back. I don't think the same way at all. I think that if you use him as a wide receiver, he should just be a pure wide receiver. Let him focus on that craft. It is way more difficult, from my understanding, to be a defensive back and know all the intricacies
Well,
of being
it
a
really
defensive back
is
than it
way
is to
harder
be
to
than it is to be a wide receiver full time. I think that if you're a defensive back, you have to be out there almost every snap. Obviously, there's going to be some rotation and everything in a defensive backfield, but you have to be there full time, and then you could have 10 to 15 routes that you run in a game as a wide receiver instead of being out there for every offensive snap. I think that is a lot easier. However, if you are trying to make money in the NFL, wide receiver is the way to go. And these guys, this is a business. Like they need to be out there to make money. And so if I'm Travis Hunter, I want to be a wide receiver. Watching his film, he looks to be good at both. I think that if he is primarily defensive back, while he is a decent, like to good cornerback, I think that his role as like a free safety would be incredible. Like that would be like a primary fit for him. He could do all that for the Giants. And at the Giants pick right here, you're looking at a couple blue chip players. Tet McMillan, I've heard some parallels saying like he could possibly be like a JJ or a Puka Nakua style player with his route running and stuff like that. I don't know that I see that sort of a ceiling on him, but I think that he is definitely the best pure wide receiver in this draft. Abdul Carter, obviously, there's a lot of buzz about him possibly being the best player in this draft overall. And Mason Graham, I think the world of him as an interior defensive tackle, but I don't know that you necessarily need that as much with this Giants team. So it kind of makes it difficult here. Which way would you go? They could just fill that Saquon role with an Ashton Jeanty right here. That would really mix things up, right?
That would be wild.
Yeah. But I don't know if you can do that. I think that Dable is going to go and Joel Shane are going to go with Travis Hunter here. It's there's a ton of options with him, a ton of upside with him. I don't know that he's the best at either position in this draft, but at least you are almost knocking out two birds with one stone by getting him, and leave it to them to decide, is he going to be more of a full-time receiver or defensive back? But Travis Hunter here going to the Giants.
All right. Listen, when I think about guys that played both in college or had some, so we got Eric Dunlap in here talking about Chris Gamble, went both ways. I always think to, Jesus Christ, now his name is going to escape me. Devin Hester, a guy who played corner in college, defensive back, was really electric with the ball in his hands, though.
As a returner, for sure.
And then when he got to the NFL, he played on the defensive side a little bit to start, but they were finding ways to get him into an offensive package all the time. And then they just converted him to wide receiver. So when you have a guy that I think is going to have the capability to be a big-time playmaker, you want the ball in his hands. That's why I lean that way. I always think to that Devin Hester, like he was a corner. He was pretty fucking good as well. And then they just converted him just so they can get the ball in his hands. But that kind of opens up the ability for possibly the best pure wide receiver in the draft to go to a team that needs to add some weapons for their young rookie quarterback in the Patriots. So we just talked about it. Tet McMillan right there on the board. Now, I don't know if he's my favorite wide receiver in this draft, but the production, you can't deny it. It's been fantastic. Evo, you got it up there, 1,300 yards. I mean, he's 130 targets each of the last 2 years. He puts up good numbers, but the competition is not always the greatest. I personally think Emeka Buka is the best wide receiver in this class, but he's more of a slot style wide receiver. The Patriots need somebody, a big body guy who can go out and win on the edge, and Tet McMillan appears to be that guy. This makes a lot of sense positionally and organizationally, like need and fit. So I'm going Tet McMillan here at 4 for the Patriots.
All righty. And look, a lot of this pick, I think, is going to factor into what Vrabel does up there in the offseason. Patriots have an astronomical amount of cap space. They can make aggressive plays at some guys like maybe a T. Higgins if he hits the open market. They have a lot of holes, and they're going to be able to fill a lot of holes with top-tier talent in free agency because of all that money that they have. And that's definitely going to start to cater how they draft. But with what we know right now, the needs of the team and who's available on the board, Ted McMillan makes a lot of sense for them because Vrabel has come out and talked, even though he's a defensive guy, he's talked about AJ Brown, how that affected his Titans team when AJ Brown left. He knows the impact that a big receiver, a true X, can have for a quarterback. He's got a young quarterback there in Drake May. You need to provide him weapons that he can utilize to continue his growth and do good things on offense. And I think Vrabel has enough confidence in himself that he's going to be able to coach up a defense, even if it has maybe lesser players on it, to a higher level than they normally would be able to play at. A la what Flores had done in Minnesota the past 2 years, is he's not had standout players every year, but he's been able to make things work a lot better there. That's what good coaches can do with lesser talent. So Ted McMillan going there to the Patriots. That brings us up to the Jaguars. Jags, I think there are two main targets here. You have Mason Graham and Will Johnson. Mason Graham, obviously super good interior defender. Will Johnson, he's my cornerback one in this draft. If it wasn't for the injury, I don't think there would be a ton of question about whether or not he would be cornerback one. It's just both of those positions are positions that this Jags team could go. What's going to be their flavor of the day, coupe de jour, if you will, or whatever? Or it's
Soup du jour.
It's tough for me though in this draft to not go with Will Johnson in this position. Not because I dislike Mason Graham or like Will Johnson better than Mason Graham, but because this draft is absolutely loaded to the gills with really good defensive line and defensive interior players. You'll find starters probably into round 3 potentially. While Mason Graham could provide that really good impact, the cornerback class, there is like 3-4 guys that I think are in first round consideration, and they're in a tier of their own where it drops off. You're going to have good role players, potentially developmental guys going into future rounds, but the cornerback talent isn't going to be there for this Jags team in round 2 like it is right here with these guys, in my opinion. That's why I'm going to go Will Johnson. I love Will Johnson in this draft. If there's any way my team could get him, I'd be super stoked. I think that he's one of those true island style cornerbacks where you can put him out there and he can guard the best receiver on another team. I think that is going to be a good boost for this Jags team. And then the Jags, if they want to go defensive interior in round 2, they're going to get a guy who is not as good as Mason Graham, but who's going to be a solid contributor with high upside available.
All right. Son of a bitch. So as this board is falling to me, so I don't have a quarterback, I don't have a running back, I don't have a wide receiver or a corner I necessarily want at this moment. I love Aston Janty, but God, 6 feels really high to take him. And I'm not trading out of this spot. So at this point, if I am the Raiders, I have to take the guy that I think is probably the best player on the board, and that's Abdul Carter. The board falls to you like this. You pair Abdul Carter with Mason Crosby or Max Crosby,
not the kicker,
Max Crosby. Sorry, I had kickers on my mind.
Yep.
He's been fantastic this last year. Now 1 year of big time production, one big grade. I don't know. Does it worry you? Not me so much. He's explosive. He's a little lean. He's not going to be a great run stopper, but I don't know that you're all that worried. Get the Raiders out there, get them rushing the passer, maybe get some turnovers and find a way to generate some short fields so you can get some offense going. You can't pass up this player in this spot. So yeah, Abdul Carter.
I don't blame you at all. And look, the statistics, when you look at the PFS statistics here, 2023, 22 don't look as good. 24 was his first year as a true hand in the dirt outside pass rusher. He's played linebacker before this and had pass rush capability, but this wasn't his job. The grades aren't going to be as good. In his first year as a true pass rusher, where that's his role on the team, he was absolutely phenomenal. And you have several guys in this draft that are kind of like that, where they were linebackers who are converting a little bit more to an edge rusher, and you're seeing really positive things happen from that. Abdul Carter, I think, the sky's the limit with him because he barely has had time to hone his craft as a pass rusher, and he's already putting up stellar statistics. And then you put that on the opposite side of Mason Crosby, They've already got some decent interior linemen there. That's going to be a stud defensive core group there for the Raiders. I do think that G&T could be a guy that you look at there because now they got Pete Carroll there. He might be looking for his Marshawn Lynch, and that's something that Pete Carroll would like to have as a safety net on offense for whatever quarterback ends up going there. But when Abdul Carter's sitting there, I don't think that you can pass him up because for him to get past the first 5 picks is almost criminal. Like you don't see that happen in most mock drafts. So yeah, that's going to be a super, super scary pass rush for this Raiders team. Jets on the clock, easy pick for me here. I'm going Mason Graham. If a Will Campbell was, or excuse me, not Will Campbell, if Will Johnson was there would be a consideration. They probably are going to lose DJ Reed to free agency. But you and with Will Johnson being there, it would be nice to pair him up with a Sauce Gardner, have super young, super good outside boundary corners in that defense. And we don't know what's going to happen on offense with the quarterback situation and Aaron Rodgers. While I think that they should probably jettison him, it feels more recently like they're going to try to run it back with him, and Aaron Glenn's not going to have a problem saying bye-bye or shut the fuck up if he causes some problems. But Mason Graham makes a ton of sense here as an interior defender. Easy get here for the Jets.
All right. And that will take us to the there's not much to say. Mason Graham's a stud. The Jets need help all over, especially on the defensive line. Mason Graham's a great pick there. It kind of stinks because that's where I wanted to go with the Panthers, but I didn't think that he was going to get to there at this point anyways. So that kind of makes me wonder where I should jump ship to. Malachi Starks is an option here. I really like that kid as a safety. Can do everything, but it feels kind of high. So I'm looking towards
Malachi isn't just a safety either. I know he's listed on here as that, but he plays all over. He reminds me quite a bit of the kid that went to the Lions from Alabama a couple years ago. I can't think of his name.
Branch.
Yeah. He reminds me of the Branch, that sort of flexibility where he can be all over the field.
Man, if you get that type of flexibility out of him, that's a pick that makes a lot of sense for the Panthers. It takes care of a positional need, and he's a premier player in my opinion. He's one of the better players in this draft, but safeties are not valued that high. You have to be kind of like a Kyle Hamilton type to get that kind of rub at that draft position. But you know what? I'm the Panthers. I'm known to do things that kind of outside the box at times. I think I'm gonna go with Malachi Starks. He's a player I really like. He plays safety, can play in the slot, lines up all over the place. Now I didn't have the Branch comp, but I will take another look at that, man. He's a really talented player. He's one of those guys. Where do you play him all the time? Maybe I'm taking him. Starks at 8.
Alrighty. And look, that I don't know that you can go wrong if you're the Panthers taking a defensive player unless you take a guy that just is a bad pick, because they have so many holes on this defense that you could throw a dart at any of the top 15 defenders on this draft board, and it's a position of need, and it's going to benefit this team. The fact that Starks has flexibility, positional flexibility, is only going to benefit you because he can play multiple roles. Next up for the Saints, again, kind of brought this up. We don't know what their head coaching situation is going to be. We don't know who the coordinator is going to be. We don't know what type of players they're going to go for schematically. All we know is the kind of needs that they have. And they have a lot of them. First and foremost, they need fucking cap space, because without cap space, they're not going to be able to put together a super competent roster. Derek Carr's situation, don't know what's going to happen there. That's where they can get a little bit of cap relief if they were to find a way to move on from him, maybe trade him to someone like a Giants team that now doesn't have a first-round quarterback. They need a bridge guy. Who knows what's going to happen there? Apparently, there's reports that the brass really is a fan of Spencer Rattler and thinks that he could develop into a solid quarterback. I'm not sold on that. I've spoke well of Spencer Rattler and what he was able to do, especially in the preseason last year. But I think that he's a limited quarterback ultimately. Either way, we're not looking at a quarterback here. Another wide receiver, could be good for whoever is playing quarterback there, of course. But I tend to lean towards defense with this, defense or offensive line, because I do think that they still have questions on this offensive line. But I'm going to go with a guy who's been a big riser, without knowing. Look, the Saints have really liked their larger defensive ends and things like that in past years. Their height, weight, speed guys, which would lean me more towards a guy like a Michael Williams from Georgia, who is kind of that height, weight, speed, athletic freak type of guy. But I don't know what type of defensive scheme they're going to be having there. So I'm going to go with the next edge rusher that I have on the board, and that's Mike Green, who's made himself a lot of money in the Senior Bowl. He has been extremely effective, albeit at Marshall as a pass rusher. Look, 17 sacks last year. His pass rush win rate 20%. Like 1 out of 5 pass rushes he's getting home. That's incredible. And then we saw him do it against good talent there at the Senior Bowl, enough that he did one practice and then fucking bounced. He put Connerly on his back. Now, one rep doesn't fucking sell you on a guy, but he's a good pure pass rusher. You're not going to get a ton necessarily from run defense, but 6'4", 248, if he's able to pack on like another 10 pounds, he's going to be a really good edge rush option in this league. So they're going to go with pure edge rush capability, Mike Green here for the Saints.
Wow. Okay. So that's higher than I expected him to go. But like you said, he made himself a shitload of money. And this guy rushes the passer. It's all he does. He is every fucking move in the tool chest. He's got it. Interesting pick there.
Including the bull rush. That bull rush on
Connerly?
On Connerly in the is it Connerly? Am I saying his name wrong?
The dude from Oregon, right?
Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, the Oregon tackle.
Yeah. He put him on his ass.
Yeah.
A dude that's much bigger than him.
Yeah. All right. Hey, listen. Can't go wrong with a guy that can rush the passer. The Falcons are probably sad that Mike Green goes this early in this draft, because I don't think they expect him to go that early. And that's exactly what that team needs, is pass rusher.
There's still guys out there. There's still guys out there.
Yeah. All right. That's going to bring up the Bears. An interesting list here of what they say they need: running back, interior offensive line, and edge. I'm not going running back here. Once again, I don't think that GNT is going to go this early. But there's a lot of offensive line in this draft that is position flexible. And there's also some really good interior offensive linemen in this draft. So that's kind of where I'm going to start leaning towards. Now, Will Campbell, I think he is for sure a tackle. A lot of these other guys, though, have some massive position flexibility. And the Bears are known to kind of go after guys that maybe don't fit the great perfectly for their scheme, but a guy that I really like, I think that he's just undersized for his position, is Armand Membo, dude. He is a really good offensive lineman, probably one of the best offensive linemen in this draft. He is just not big enough to play tackle. He's only 6'3". His arms aren't long enough. You slide him inside at guard, and this dude could be a really good, like, all-pro style guard. I'm going to step out on a little bit of a limb here. A guy that I really like that I think should slide inside. We're going Membo. I think is how you pronounce his name. Yep. I don't know for sure, but that's where I'm going here.
I've heard Membu. And he's a guy that I like too. Look, you brought it up, positional flexibility with the offensive lineman, especially in the top end of this draft. I don't even know if it's necessarily positional flexibility. I think that there is just a lot of guys who play tackle in college who are way better suited towards playing guard. You bring up Will Campbell, think that he's a true tackle, and I kind of like him as a tackle. But again, he's a guy, we're talking arm length here. He's got the correct height and weight, but his arm length is not good for playing the tackle position in the NFL. The problem is that those guards, those are the ones that are down in like more of the 3-point stance. They're bent over a little bit more. The tackles are more upright. Will Campbell plays upright, and he looks super awkward out of position when he has to bend over. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a question, is like, can you coach him to be positioned a little bit better if he were to slide into guard. The fact that he's played tackle, he knows how to play it. I think he'll have the skill and technique for that. But again, it comes down to arm length. Are you going to be able to reach on some of these edge rushers in the NFL? I don't know. Obviously, he's a really good offensive lineman, and I like him in this draft. But Membu going to the Bears. The question I think a lot of people will also have is it worth taking a guy that you see as a guard this high? Because guard value tends to drop a little bit.
Caleb Williams, and the interior pressure that the Bears dealt with this year was fucking terrible.
And I am of the ilk of, we've seen a drop off from running backs, like the value of them in the NFL. And then we saw a resurgence this last year with how good some of these running backs played. I think the same sort of vitriol towards guards is happening. And the NFL is quickly going to be like, no, we need guards. Guards are going to start getting paid a whole bunch because they are of value. And there's a lot of guys in this draft that could end up being pretty fucking good guards in the NFL. So expect that they're going to start looking that way a little bit. All right. 49ers on the clock. I wish we had a Joe Rockstar around here to get his thoughts on who he would want to go with. Unless they're moving on from CMC, I don't see GT fucking going here to the 49ers, which, by the way, I am on board. I don't like it as a Vikings fan, but I'm on board with the Bears going after a GT here because look, Ben Johnson has seen the value of running backs in his offensive schemes. An interesting thing that I hadn't considered before, DeAndre Swift is on this team with the Bears right now. Mm-hmm. DeAndre Swift was a running back for Ben Johnson previously, and they ousted him and opted for Montgomery. Maybe Swift isn't going to be on this team a ton longer. I don't know. It's something to kind of watch for. And that would immediately accelerate the need for a running back here, getting an Ashton GT type of guy. Or, but this is a running back heavy class. So I think that they're going to take a running back early, regardless. It might be in the second round. But I would not stray away from the thoughts about Ashton GT making it to pick 10 and the Bears selecting him just because Ben Johnson might want that type of player on his offense. But the 49ers here, I think that they need to really start looking at this offensive line. That's where I'm leaning as well, because your left tackle isn't getting any younger. You've got a bunch of holes that are going to be opening up here or needs that are already available. And so you have to start looking not only as a guy who can play right now, but someone who could play in the future for you, taking over for Trent Williams. Because of the concerns that I brought up about Will Campbell and that arm length, I do think that he probably ends up being more of a guard long-term in the NFL. But if you needed to moonlight him as a tackle, that's an option. But if you're looking at a future replacement for a Trent Williams, maybe he's not the guy because he's not a tackle that you want. One of my highest rated tackles, though, in this class is Josh Simmons. I think that he can play guard, but I think he's better suited as a tackle overall. You would know a little bit more being a Ohio State fan here. Obviously, he had some injury issues, came from, I believe, San Diego State over to you guys at
I don't remember where he transferred from.
I believe it was San Diego. I'm not positive. He played right tackle at his previous college and then moved over to left with you guys. I thought he looked pretty good. I think that he still has a ton of room to grow. Do you have any thoughts on Simmons? I think the reason why he is, looked down upon by some people is because he only had 6 games that he played in this year. He was injured.
Yeah, so he's a pretty athletic guy. Do you transfer from one school? Do you make it to Ohio State? You play on the right side. You play on the left side. So he is a very athletic guy, but I think that you want to see more polish. He is not a finished product. He needs better work with his hand placement, his strikes, and things like that. He's a very, very capable person, could get even maybe a little bit bigger because he's so fucking athletic. But I think he's a solid player. I think he can play tackle. I don't know if he could play left tackle at the NFL. I think the right side would be more suited for him in the NFL. I think that's a better spot for him, but he has shown the ability to play some left tackle as well.
Yeah. And I think that's with San Fran that he can be a spot starter if need be on the interior, but that he's not going to be thrust into that left tackle role, which would ultimately be their goal, is for him to be the heir apparent to Trent Williams. But he's not going to have to play that right away. So they can build him up, make him a good tackle, and then that's their future there at the position, Josh Simmons.
And moving on to one of the easiest picks in the draft, Jerry Jones's old ass is sprinting as fast as he can up to the podium because Ashton Jeanty is still there. Ashton Jeanty is a Cowboy, and the Cowboys finally have some sort of semblance of a running game. They have to figure out a way to run the ball. Everybody has talked about it. We lamented about this entire process last year for the Cowboys. They didn't have a fucking soul who was going to control that running back room, that was going to take over that running back room. We talked about the corpse of Ezekiel Elliott, and that went exactly the way we expected. Rico Dowdle is a cool change of pace back. You need a guy who can be a thumper, run between the tackles, and go get you yards, and you need him. Ashton Jeanty is that fucking guy. Go and get him, Jerry. If he's there, you have to take him.
Yeah, like it seems like the easiest pick in the draft if he falls here. But I have seen a lot more talks about heck, they might look towards like a wide receiver option to pair up with CD, which you get Dak there. He's only had one super solid receiving option, and that's been CD Lamb. You start to open things up a lot more by bringing in an Emeka Ibuka, a Matthew Golden, or a Luther Burden into the system, and it makes some sense there. Um, and with how deep this running back class is, you could get a guy who's got less, wear on the tires, I guess, as GT, but also it is extremely tough to pass up a blue chip talent like GT. He's been super, super productive in college, and it looks like he can play with the big boys right away. So makes sense for the Cowboys to go GT here. Dolphins pick 13. They need help all along the offensive line. If Malachi Starks was here, he's a big need there in the defensive backfield for them, but obviously he is off the board at this point. There's a couple safeties that I think that they could look at who aren't traditionally seen as first round picks, but I think that they're going to be risers. Specifically in Nick Emanuwari, I think that he is going to be a fringe first round pick, possibly, or looked at that way by the end of things. And so if they really felt strong about him, that's a position that they could go with. But I'm not going to be going there in this draft. We still got a couple months till we got to really be thinking about those late risers. They could be looking at some edge rush talent. There are edge rushers here on the board, but you've got Chubb, who could be a cut or trade candidate just because he's been injured so much. They've had a lot of injuries at the edge rush position, and then you let Andrew Van Ginkel go. It's kind of a situation there on the defense where they got to fix some stuff. But to me, this McDaniel's offense runs based off of explosive plays. They need to be able to protect Tua. He's their long-term investment right now. You need to bring in an offensive lineman to help here. I think because Will Campbell does have some flexibility and they have needs at both guard and tackle, Will Campbell's the position to go with here, or the guy to go with here. And they can figure out what spot he's going to play. It doesn't matter. They need help at both guard and tackle. Campbell can play both.
Yeah, I agree, man. We talked about Will. I think he can play tackle. Do you like him a little bit better as a guard? Either way, this helps the Lions. Jesus Christ, I'm just saying words. This helps the Dolphins quite a bit. They have to protect Tua. They have got to protect Tua.
I love Will Campbell as a tackle. The arms still scare me. I think you are still going to have some degradation of capability there because of no matter how good he is technically, like the arms on some of those really bendy edge rushers, it's going to be difficult.
Then it'll definitely be difficult. I still like the pick, and then I get to roll right into the Colts and have another easy pick because their top need by one of the top prospects in this draft, position-wise, Tyler Warren, right there. You need to find a way to make your quarterback better. Give him a big old safety blanket in Tyler Warren that he can check it down to. Go out and get your tight end. Torres, you'll be very happy with an extra weapon because Tyler Warren's one of those guys that can move the sticks. as well as break a big play, kind of that ability after the catch as well. That Travis Kelce like ability after the catch. Tyler Warren is an absolute stud. Run blocking, sure, could use some work. That's not his. That's not what you draft this guy for. You draft this guy to go make catches and get in the end zone. Had a great year. You can see the numbers here. Evo, if Tyler Warren's on the board for the Colts, I mean, do they consider a wide receiver, or do they got to find somebody that's nice and easy for Anthony Richardson to get the ball to?
I mean, this is a super common pick going here to the Colts. It makes sense. I disagree with you a little bit about, so like if we're looking at the first round talent tight ends here, you've got Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, and then there's some rumble about Fannin out of Bowling Green.
I think Tyler Warren is clear and above Colston, and I like Fannin, but
if you're looking for a receiving option, Colston Loveland is the better receiver. He's more of that offline receiving style tight end. He's a big wide receiver, but you're not getting anything blocking wise out of him. With a Tyler Warren, you are getting more of the George Kittle to me, because he's not like an outstanding blocker, but he can block more than as an inline tight end than most guys in this draft. He also provides all sorts of offensive utility as a H-back, as a passer, as we saw in the college football playoffs, as a receiver. Like, he does a lot of things very well. He's a multi-tool, which is a good thing that to position around your quarterback. But the problem is, and this is the big question mark that I think that a lot of people have about this Colts team and the offense in particular, like, they had one of the lowest target rates towards tight ends in the NFL. So does tight end really matter to them? Now, you can point towards they didn't have a ton of talent there, but they had some capable guys that can still receive the ball. Is that a Anthony Richardson thing where he doesn't look towards the tight end? Is that a schematic thing where they don't look towards the tight end? I don't know. But to me, it's like, if you put a talented guy out there, you've got to use them. As long as they're able to bridge that gap, Tyler Warren makes a lot of sense here, because he can provide you better blocking than your average tight end. He's good as an inline tight end. He provides a lot of that offensive utility. Otherwise, look, you want to look at all the different safety blankets for a young quarterback, right? You want a good offensive line. Their offensive line is solid. You want a really good running back. You've got Jonathan Taylor. You've already got that. You've got some receiving options in Alex Pierce and Josh Downs and Pittman. You've already got those pieces there. The one thing that you don't really have is a standout tight end. This is the guy that can block, he can catch, he can run, he can do whatever you need him to do. Tyler Warren makes a lot of sense to me.
So we'll just agree to disagree. I think his blocking is okay. It's really hard for me to comp guys to George Kittle, man. George Kittle is a fucking really athletic, like tackle capable blocker.
And I'm not saying he's George Kittle by any means. I'm saying that George Kittle is your inline tight end. Tyler Warren's an inline.
Tyler Warren lines up there for sure. He will block. He is a capable blocker. But
I think that if you're looking for a pure receiving tight end, then you go with a Colston Loveland.
Sure, if you want a guy, if you're looking for a pure move guy, yeah. But I think Tyler Warren has the same capability. I think he could be on a similar scale of like oh gosh, I don't want to say Bauer because he had just a crazy year.
Yeah.
Who was it 2 years ago?
Dalton.
The Lions tight end.
Laporta.
He could be like a Sam Laporta style guy. Blocks a little bit, but can also go out and catch the rock for you. That's more of a comp where I see Tyler Warren. But I think either way, you put a talented player on the field, it would be very helpful for Anthony Richardson, assuming that he will throw him the ball.
Okay. I get that. Who's the Taysom Hill? I think that Tyler Warren is almost like a Taysom Hill on coke, on steroids. Like, because Taysom Hill kind of does all sorts of different shit, except for he wasn't meant to do any of those things necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah. Tyler Warren is meant to do all those things. That's what you're getting out of him. Again, you're getting better inline blocking than you would from a receiving style tight end, but also typically if you get an inline tight end that's meant to be a blocker, that guy is not going to be a pass catcher, right? His sole purpose is to be out there as a blocker. Tyler Warren does better than most receiving style inline tight ends, is where I'm kind of going with it. So Tyler Warren there going to the Colts. Up next, the Falcons, and it's very obvious they need help on defense, specifically with pass rush, right?
Yeah.
They've got guys along the line. They drafted Dorless last year and some guys along the defensive line that still need time to mature and get better. And those guys will be okay against the run. That's I'm focused a little bit less on the run defense here. They need pass rush. James Pierce is not good against the run. He's lean. He is against the run. He is a good pass rusher, though. That is what James Pierce is good at. I'm going with James Pierce as just a pure pass rusher. The other option here that they could go with is a Michael Williams. Again, this is a guy. He makes me think of who was Trayvon Walker, who came out of Georgia and went like super high, number one overall to the Jags. He's the same sort of like guy to me, where we're talking about height, weight, speed, athleticism freak, but he hasn't put it together like skill wise. That's what Michael Williams is. And if they want to go that route, we know that Arthur Blank likes taking guys from Georgia already. They could go that route, and I wouldn't blame Michael Williams. Is going to continue to be a riser here in this draft process from his showing here at the Senior Bowl and everything. But to me, if they're looking just pure, we want a guy who can go out and rush the pass right now, and we'll see if we can develop anything out of him as a run defender. That's James Pierce. So I'm going James Pierce, pure pass rush potential.
All right, James Pierce. Listen, we know that the Falcons have got to find a way to start generating some pressure. At this point in the draft, that's kind of where you have to go. You have to find a guy that you think could improve your pass rush, and he's probably the best one on the board at this point. Still a young player, decent run grades by PFF as well here. So I like the pick. And that'll take us over to the Cardinals, who have line issues, offensive line and defensive line issues. And then the way the board is falling right now, defensive line gets a little hairy. I could look at maybe getting a little crazy with a Walter Nolan, but that feels super, super rich. But Kenneth Grant right here, I think could make a lot of sense if I don't go offensive line. Kyler could use some help on the offensive line, that's for sure, but Kyler does a good job of escaping. Kyler doesn't take a ton of sacks. So I'm going to think defensive line, and I'm going to go Kenneth Grant. I think he is a very strong dude, will help solidify the interior of their defensive line. Really good run stopper, doesn't have a ton of pass rush ability, but I think a guy that will help kind of fortify up the interior of their defense. And then with that, while you talk, Evo, I'm going to run upstairs because I use the bathroom.
All right. Yeah. Kenneth Grant, this is a guy that, I mean, I really like. I like a lot of these interior defensive linemen. Kenneth Grant out of this group is kind of that big, meaty mauler. I was watching some tape on him last night. He has a very good first step. He is quick off the ball, and he is good at taking on double teams. And typically with these sorts of players, you think, okay, they're just going to be the guy that clogs the middle, is able to take up those double teams and allow the other players around him to generate the pass rush. But you look at his pass rush win rate for an interior defensive lineman, right around 10%. That's really fucking good. Only 3 sacks, but he is still getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback despite that. His redirection and his sense of where the ball is going is really damn good. Like, saw this a lot on the tape where there would be cutbacks by the running back because things are being stuffed. You know, running back goes to the right, things are being stuffed by guys like Kenneth Grant, and so that running back cuts back to the left. And Kenneth Grant is one of those guys that has the innate ability about knowing, okay, this guy's cutting back, and he immediately shuts the block and is able to go after that running back, stop him. Like, I like Kenneth Grant a lot. I think that he is going to be a great piece for this Cardinals team along the middle. Someone that I'm honestly, if the Vikings stick and pick at 24, he's a guy that I'm looking at to shore up the interior of our line. He immediately takes over as a nose tackle, pushes Harrison Phillips out to an edge role, which is more suited for him. It's kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone for my Vikings team. For this Cardinals team, he's a super solid pick there. Kenneth Grant going to the Cardinals. It looks like Mike dropped out of here more than just pissing for right now, which is fine. That's okay. He'll be back. But that takes me to the Bengals. All right. Bengals are in an interesting spot, right? Wide receiver, we don't know what is going to be happening with T. Higgins. T. Higgins said that he's willing to take a little bit less money to stick with his team, but I don't think he's willing to take that much less money. We are talking about a guy who thinks he's a number one overall receiver, a true number one on a team. I don't believe that. I think he still has some flaws. I'm still remembering 2 years ago where he just had tons of dropped catches in fantasy football, and he frustrated the hell out of me. This year, he looked a lot better. You also have Yoshevich as a third option there, who would kind of move into the number two receiver role if Teagans were to leave. But I don't think that Yoshevich is a number two style receiver. Was a touchdown machine, but I don't think he's a true number two receiver. So this Bengals team could be looking to replace that. And when you have Emeka Buka, Luther Burden, and a Matthew Golden all on the board, all really good options there. Like, I could see any one of those guys fitting into this Bengals team alongside Jamar Chase and being extremely productive. That's just completely ignoring the biggest problem on this team, though, and that is the defense, the defensive line, their ability to get pass rushes. What got Lou Anarumo fired from this Bengals team, right? So I have to go with defense here. You could go offensive lineman. They need to protect their investment in Joe Burrow. I wouldn't disagree with that, but to me, you have to add someone on this defensive line opposite of Trey Henderson that can provide some sort of pass rush. And overall, like, this defense was underperforming, not just in the pass rush, but in their run defense as well. And I think the two guys here that they will look at are going to be Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart reminds me a lot of a guy that the last team, the Cardinals, took last year in Robinson, who I was a huge fan of, especially towards the end of that first round, where they can get a guy who's a height, weight, speed, athletic freak, has some pass rush capability, but is just going to be an all-around good defensive end or 3-4 end type of player. Shamar Stewart, I think that he has a lot of that in him. He did himself some good things in the Senior Bowl this week as well, which is going to raise his capital a little bit. But Michael Williams, to me, is that height, weight, speed freak guy, the Trayvon Walker guy that was taken a couple years ago by the Jags, who I think scouts are going to kind of be excited by what he could potentially be. The Bengals just need some help there. Look, defensive interior with Walter Nolan is an option as well. But I'm going to go with Michael Williams for this pick for the Bengals. Seattle Seahawks, Mike's pick. Obviously, I'm going to let him go here, but we're going to kind of talk about the team. Interior offensive line, to me, is their biggest problem on this team. It'll be interesting to see where Mike wants to go here, but interior offensive line is just consistently a problem for the Seahawks team. Years ago, we talked about how they would draft tackle after tackle, and they couldn't find a guy, even taking first-round tackles, they couldn't find a guy that could fill that role consistently. They've kind of got their tackles figured out, but now it's the interior offensive line that they're having issues with. John Schneider apparently is notorious for saying that interior offensive line, specifically guards, just aren't worth it. They aren't worth it. You can find anyone to play his position he wants, a good center and good tackles. But I brought this up earlier. I think just like how running backs have been maligned, they haven't been looked at highly in the NFL, that guards are going to be that here in the next year. The value of guards is going to increase exponentially because the run game is coming back and you need good guards for road grading up the middle of the field. But I mean, let's be real. It's needed for interior pass rush as well, defending interior pass rush. So for me, if I were going with this pick, I'm going to be looking at offensive lineman. Now, you notice I put tackle on here as well as interior offensive line because a bunch of these guys on here are tackles who should be playing guard in the NFL. Oh, there we are. Mike's back. Computer crash is over.
Yeah, computer crash. So bad things had to happen, and I needed to use the bathroom. Then I came back downstairs, and my computer was crashed. So at some point while I was gone, this thing took a colossal shit. However,
we're even on a new camera.
Yeah, I am on my laptop now because everything's shut down, and I didn't want to take the time to do it. So Evo, I'm gonna have to catch up here on the where we are. I went with Kenneth Grant. I like the player, very talented, big dude. Also, Michael Williams, I see goes off the board there at 17. I'm gonna have to get another option of PFF up, and I will try to keep track of who goes where. But uh, tell me about what you got for Michael Williams there, man. Kind of that tweener player.
Well, you let me know when you got PFF back up because we'll round out what we have here. We'll recap because we're about halfway through this first round and get you up to my pick here, Michael Williams at pick 17.
Perfect.
But like I said to the people, Kenneth Grant, a guy that I really liked, a guy that I was hoping would fall more towards my Vikings because he's one of the interior defensive linemen that I'm a big fan of in this draft class. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that I do like in this draft class, but I think that he's going to play that good nose tackle role. He has a really good first step, not great pass rush grades, but the amount of pressure that he provides and his ability to redirect off of double teams to go after a running back who's cutting back is pretty fucking awesome. He is an athletic freak for his size as well. Those are Jim Harbaugh's words, not mine. Or John Harbaugh. I always get them mixed up.
Yeah, Jim and John. I'm back up on PFF. So let's go ahead and hit me with the recap real quick. I'll go ahead and start drafting these players because I'm stuck to one screen now.
All righty, cool. So pick 1 overall. Shadur Sanders goes to the Titans. Cam Ward goes to your Brownies at pick number 2. Travis Hunter, pick number 3 to the Giants. We'll see if he plays wide receiver, cornerback for them. You took Tet McMillan at pick number 4 with the Patriots. I went Will Johnson to pair up in that defensive backfield for the Jaguars. Abdul Carter somehow still available on the board at pick 6, so he goes to pair with Max Crosby there with the Raiders. Mason Graham shores up the interior defensive line for the Jets. You take Malachi Starks as a safety or overall defensive backfield player for this Panthers team that could use people everywhere. I went with Mike Green, pure pass rusher for this New Orleans Saints team because we don't know what sort of scheme they're going to be running yet. Armand Membu goes to pick 10, Chicago Bears, as what you believe is going to be a guard. I think he played both, but they need help at both spots, especially if they end up moving on. Braxton Jones, they might need to use him some at tackle. Josh Simmons to the 49ers. Ashton Jeanty, easiest pick there to the Cowboys. Will Campbell to the Dolphins to play tackle or guard. Tyler Warren as that safety blanket for Anthony Richardson with the Colts. James Pierce, pure pass rush talent, going to the Falcons because they need that. And then you had Kenneth Grant going to the Cardinals. And I got Michael Williams going to the Bengals. So with this pick, I went Michael Williams because, look, they could be using wide receiver, especially if T. Higgins ends up departing. Andre Yosefis, I'm not sure that he is the answer as a number 2 receiver there for the Bengals. And again, who knows what happens with T. Higgins. So obviously, an Emeka Ibuka or Luther Burden or Matthew Golden, all those guys make sense as a second option for Joe Burrow as a wide receiver. They could still use some help along the offensive line, along the interior. But at the end of the day, the reason why Lou Anarumo was fired was because of the lack of talent that was out there on the defensive side. That's why I go with Michael Williams. He's a high weight speed freak type of guy. He got better as the year went along as he was recovering from a high ankle sprain. I think that scouts are going to be like, hey, this is maybe what Tavon Austin could have been, which Tavon Austin is turning or not Tavon Austin. Who's the guy for the Jags that was taken number 1 overall? Travion Walker.
Oh, Trayvon Walker.
Yeah, like he Tavon Austin. God, that's a
that's a name.
That's a name. But look, it's the same sort of situation in Georgia where this guy's height, weight, speed, athleticism type of guy. I think that's what they think could turn into the NFL. They just need dudes along that defensive line to help out with the pass rush and run stop. Again, that's what got Lou Anarumo fired. Wasn't the fact that he's not necessarily like a terrible defensive coordinator, but it's like at some point you're just not putting any talent on that side of the ball. And there was just a heavy attrition over the past like 3 years of players from that team. So Michael Williams goes 17 to the Bengals. And that puts you at 18 with Seahawks.
Puts me at 18 with the Seahawks. I apologize. I had a lot more shit going on with my notes. So this is going to be a little scattered, maybe, but Seahawks 17 on the clock. Once again, interior offensive line, how this continues to be questions, problems. Now, there's a couple of guys in this draft that maybe has some center guard flexibility. Gray Zabel was that kind of small school guy that people wanted to hitch their wagons to, that he was going to, maybe show up, show out. Played okay. So that feels way, way too rich at this point in the draft. But I do still have a Kelvin Banks on the board. And I think Kelvin Banks is a guy that could probably end up playing quite a bit of motherfucking guard. He is not as strong as I would like him to be. He needs to play with a little bit better play strength. So the slide into the interior may be tough. Super, super athletic tackle, though. There's just I'm not a Shamar Stewart guy, so I'm going to stay away from there with the Seahawks. I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks. I'm going to expect him to slide inside. I don't think that is going to change too much. So I'm going to go with that. Kelvin Banks to the Seahawks. Offensive line help has been a problem from them for quite some time. They're going to shore some of that up here with Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, and I brought this up while you were away. It seemed like every year we were talking about, like, Seattle needs to fix their offensive line. They would try to take tackles. Things would kind of work out. They'd be average to below average. But John Schneider has been notorious for saying that guards are not worth it. Like, guards are not worth it in the first round. Like, he hates guards. He thinks you can just find a guy and plop him in and he'll be okay. We're starting to see that is not the case in the NFL. You need good interior offensive linemen. This needs to be the time for him to go after an offensive lineman, interior guy who can shore that up, because that's been a perennial problem for them, and he needs to kind of shuck that thought process. You brought up Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State University.
Mm-hmm.
He would have been my pick. Love the guy. The reports out of the Senior Bowl is he was the best player in the entire Senior Bowl. Like, all practices, everything. He played tackle in college. They played him at all 5 positions along the offensive line during the Senior Bowl week, and he looked like he'd been playing them forever, are the reports coming out of there. Like, he didn't have to, like, learn the position at all for each of those spots. He just played them all well. I'm thinking this is a guy is like last year's Graham Barton. A lot of people like to say, because it's a North Dakota guy, North Dakota State, Cody Mock, a guy that we saw a couple years ago, who ended up moving from tackle to guard, plays for the Buccaneers, and he is probably a top 10, 15 guard right now in the league. That's the sort of stuff that I see from Gray Zabel, except for I think that he's better. Like, and you can play him at either guard spot or center. I don't like him as much as a tackle in the NFL, but I think if you have to play him there, you can. I think Gray Zabel is going to be a guy that we're going to see continue to skyrocket up draft boards. Right now, he's a surprise to see in the middle of the first round, but I absolutely think that he's going to be taken in the first round, and I think that we are looking in the correct range right now of where he could be taken. Like, I'm a big Gray Zabel fan, and I hate NDSU for what it's worth. Next up, Buccaneers. They have a bunch of needs along the defense. I think a sneaky play for them, though, could be a Chris Godwin replacement at wide receiver. It'll be interesting. What happens with Baker Mayfield? This is what, 8 offensive coordinators in 8 years or something like that. Like,
it's a lot of whatever it is.
And I might even be wrong with that to an extent, because he had the time where he was with Carolina and then jetted over to the Rams, and so that counts differently. Look, hopefully he is good enough to weather that sort of a storm and continued schematic changes there, because like having that many different offenses, it's like learning a new language constantly. And like everything's based off of Latin, right? Type thing. And like, so you kind of know some of the differences, but either way, like Mike Evans is going to be returning. Chris Godwin, after that terrible injury, I don't like if he returns to the Bucs. I don't know if he returns right away. Like, it's going to take a while. So looking at a receiving option with Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka both sitting there, those are like super solid options for him to be replacements for a Chris Godwin. We saw Jalen McMillan last year play good. I thought that he had his ups and downs. but still looks like a solid option. I don't want to call him a number 2 yet. I still think he's a number 3 style wide receiver for this team. And Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka could, both of those guys, step into a number 2 role right away and be really good weapons for this team. But on the defensive side of the ball, they're getting old. They've had injuries. This is a team that hates injuries. I mean, what team doesn't hate injuries? But they don't like going after players that have injuries. And that's what's going to shy me away from Benjamin Morrison, because I think Benjamin Morrison is almost criminally underrated on a lot of these draft boards because of the hip injury. He has said that he's coming out. He said that he's going to enter the draft, and I don't think that he would enter the draft if his hip wasn't going to be good enough for him to perform at the combine. I don't think it's going to scare away teams too much, but Bucks are one of those teams that do shy away from guys who are coming off of injury. Otherwise, I think that Benjamin Morrison would be a fantastic addition to this defensive backfield. With that, I'm going to be looking more towards the linebacker edge rush help. And there's a guy on here that I think is kind of, he's mislabeled, and because of that, he's further down the board. Jalen Walker out of Georgia, I think, is very much like an Abdul Carter, where he's played linebacker, but he started to do a little more edge rush, and he's going to be better as an edge rusher who kind of is that stand-up outside linebacker that comes down and does the edge rushing. And so Jalen Walker is going to be my guy here as an edge rush talent for the Buccaneers.
All right, Jalen Walker. We'll go down the linebacker here. All right, so that's an interesting pick, man. That seems a little high. Jalon is not a bad player by any means, but you're projecting upside with him converting over into mostly a pass.
PFF has talked about this. His ratings are going to dramatically change because they have him rated right now or listed as a linebacker. Once he switches to edge, he's probably going to be listed as one of those top 3 to 4 edge guys. Because he's just like Abdul Carter, played linebacker, switched this year to edge rush, and they still have him listed as a linebacker on here. Typically in mocks, he is going somewhere between pick 12 and 25. Okay. I'm a big Jalen Walker fan as far as like we're going to see the Zach Bond effect to start happening. Zach Bond is a linebacker who's converted a little bit more to an edge rusher, and you saw how good of a year Zach Bond has had. People are going to be looking for that sort of a guy. You're getting that out of an Abdul Carter, and you're getting that out of a Jalen Walker. He's a linebacker that's getting a lot of play as an edge rusher.
All right, man. I can see it. All right, so that's going to take us on to pick 20 and the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos, really good year. Interesting, their pieces on offense, what they're going to try to do. This is a team that did not run the ball very efficiently. They have drafted wide receivers, but you didn't see any big kind of leaps. Obviously, you want to try to support this young quarterback. You want to add an offensive piece here. Now, there's some really good receivers in Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka. I love Emeka Egbuka in this spot as a slot receiver. The other option in my mind is, do you think about tight end? Because you brought it up. You know, Colston has been viewed as a potential first-round tight end, obviously a little later in the first round than here at 20. But I think that also becomes an option, a nice pass-catching option for that offense. I mean, Jimmy Graham was an absolute stud in the Sean Payton offense. Could we
Marcus Colston before that, a guy who was a tight end that was really used as a wide receiver. Like Sean Payton likes those guys.
He really does like those guys. So as I'm trying to build out this group, I got to decide, okay, do I want another receiver or am I going tight end? And I think I'm leaning towards the tight end spot just because the drop comes a little bit right here. I think Tyler Warren is head and shoulders above everybody else. And then there's Colston and then Fannin. Colston is above Fannin. But after those guys, you don't have a ton of talent. Colston is a guy that will go out and be a really good pass catcher. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to project that right here. I'm going going Colston at 20 to the Broncos.
All righty. I like the pick. I like Colston Loveland a lot as a receiver. it is tough because I don't want to say he reminds me of Marcus Colston, but Marcus Colston, who was one of my all-time favorite players, because of how dominant he was for me in fantasy as a tight end, right? But he's that bigger body. He's definitely just like a big wide receiver. He's so smooth with his route running. Like when I was watching all that JJ McCarthy film, I kept on being like, who the fuck is this dude that's catching the ball all the time? Like he looks so good. And I think he's going to be super solid in the NFL. And he fits kind of what Sean Payton likes to do. Other options here, like you kind of brought up, Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka. Like we're obviously going to be seeing these guys come off the board here probably pretty soon. But Luther Burden, I think, would be a very good fit for this team because if you look at what Marvin Mims was on this Broncos team, the type of plays that they were doing, like the little shallow screens and stuff like that, that's exactly what Luther Burden is built to do, and Marvin Mims is not built to do. Like Marvin Mims is a big dude. Mims sounds like a little dude. He ain't. He's tall. I think he's like 6'4". Like he's a big guy, and he shouldn't be running those sorts of routes.
Right.
And a Luther Burden immediately fits in and is that guy and is super explosive for this team. Emeka Egbuka is like
exceptional with the ball in his hands.
He's I don't want to. It sounds like disparaging, but he's like the highest floor wide receiver in this group, where he's just going to be your perennial like Chris Carter, catches everything that comes his way. He's going to be good for over 1,000 yards and 80 catches every year. Like he is going to be extremely solid. And that's like, what else do you want for a young quarterback? Is a guy that is essentially like that safety blanket. That's the sort of like extreme high floor is going to be fantastic for the team. So either of those guys make sense. Outside of Colson Loveland and those guys, I think the other thing that you got to look at here that'll be a little bit sneaky is going to be running back. Omari and Hampton would make a lot of sense here. If Genty were to make it this far down, I think that they would absolutely pounce on him as well. But Broncos, we know Sean Payton likes to run the ball. I don't think that he's fallen in love with any of the running backs that they have on this roster. They are having, I believe it's Javonte Williams is a free agent this year, not expected to return. They let's see here. Yeah. Jaleel McLaughlin's still going to be under contract there, but he was their backup. And then you have Tyler Batty and Audric Estime. Audric Estime was brought in last year, but he's got some fumble concerns. I still don't think that he is Sean Payton's guy. So if Sean Payton wanted to, he can go out there and get a guy like an Amari and Hampton, or of course a GNT if he were to follow this spot. So running back is a little bit of a sneaky play here if you think a guy like Amari and Hampton could break into the first round. Next up, Steelers. For all the reasons that I just talked about, I'm taking Emeka Egbuka. Yeah. Extreme high floor. Look, it seems like the Steelers do not take first round wide receivers. The last time was, I think, in like 2006 or 7. The guy's name is going to escape me. But they take some guys in like the second round who are talented, but have issues in our head cases. Like they need someone that is a good wide receiver that isn't going to be a drama fest, that is extremely high floor safety net type of guy to whoever ends up playing quarterback there. And I think Emeka Egbuka can be that. They have issues. They could definitely go after a Ben Morrison here. Like Ben Morrison alongside Porter in that defensive backfield makes a lot of sense. They could be looking for replacements for some of their aging defensive linemen. Don't be surprised if TJ Watt's like rope there isn't super long. He could take the route of JJ and retire early. The amount of production that you're getting from him is good. Like it's very good, but we might have seen the drop off this year. That is enough for them to be like, hey, let's trade this guy for a couple first round picks and move on, because his contract's obviously huge. His production might be falling off. Who knows if he's going to go get into broadcasting like his brother. He's already in the commercials for shit with like Peloton with his brother. Like there's a sneaking suspicion in my head that TJ Watt's going to like hang up the cleats way earlier than we're expecting, just like his brother, and that his fall off from his production might be very rapid. I don't think that they're going to move on from this year, but if the Steelers have a really bad beginning of the season, they might move him before the trade deadline. That's just a little like reckless speculation there. So you could be looking at the defensive front guys to kind of replace some of their aging pieces there. But for me, it's Emeka Egbuka. They need something talent-wise on offense to help out whatever quarterback ends up playing there.
All right, man. Yeah, they definitely need some wide receiver help. It kind of stinks though that Emeka Egbuka goes there. I love Emeka Egbuka. I hate the Steelers. Also, it kind of fucks up my next pick because I'm going wide receiver, but I don't want to draft Luther Burden to the Chargers because Luther Burden does very similar things to Ladd McConkey. They're going to play out of the slot for the most part. And while I think Luther Burden is a very talented wide receiver, I don't know that I need another slot wide receiver for my guy. I need somebody who can kind of win on the outside. And it doesn't leave a ton of options first round talent wise.
What do you think about Matthew Golden?
Other than maybe a Matthew Golden, which is where I'm going to go here. He's the guy that can win on the outside. I like Burden better, but team fit wise, it makes more sense for them to go after Matthew Golden because you have Ladd that can work on the inside. Also, I would not be surprised to see another running back added to this group in the second round if they don't decide to just fucking do it in the first round. But if they can get a Matthew Golden right here, they probably go that route. Somebody that wins out on the edge. And then look to add another running back in the second or third round because, like we've talked about, there's a fuckload of running backs, and almost none of them are going to go in the first round.
Yeah, Omarion Hampton is definitely a guy I think that would be in consideration here. Harbaugh absolutely would go for a 1-2 punch with J.K. Dobbins here, and I'm high on Omarion Hampton. I still want to do more work with him, but I think that he could definitely creep into the back end of the first round as the next running back off the board. Matthew Golden is a guy that I think is being somewhat overlooked, but he's slowly been rising more and more on boards to be a first round wide receiver. He's just so smooth with his route running. Like, he's an extremely good route runner. He's not necessarily going to blow the doors off speed wise, except for there are rumors that he's going to be running in the low 4.4s at the combine. If that's the case,
he does that. He'll go higher than this.
He's going to bump a lot higher. If that's the case, which I don't know, because everyone looks at Isaiah Bond as being more the speed guy there. If that happens with Golden, he's easily going to be a mid first round pick probably. But solid hands, really good route runner. I like Matthew Golden a lot. That's a decent option for the Chargers, and that's where you are going for sure.
Yeah, I'm going Matthew Golden there.
All right, Matthew Golden, the Chargers. Next up, Green Bay Packers. You are on the clock again.
Oh yeah, I get to go back to back here because I'm not letting you pick for the Packers. Now here they have guys that can win on the outside ish if they catch the ball. They could use somebody who also works on the inside of the field. They could use another receiver because I know that they think that they're good there. I don't think that they're that good there, but there's a better player on the board than Luther Burden, who is going to be a position of need because I believe that Jair Alexander is going to be gone. Benjamin Morrison is still on the board. I like him. I think he's going to be healthy. He's coming out for a reason. I know you probably don't like this. You like Benjamin Morrison, but for team need and really kind of positional value right here, they like their receivers up there in Green Bay. We don't necessarily love them, but they do. So I think they probably look to the defensive side of the ball. Benjamin Morrison.
All right. Any thought towards Jahdae Barron in this? I'm going to select Benjamin Morrison for you here. I'll go ahead and do it. But any thoughts towards Jahdae Barron in that spot?
I like Morrison better. And listen, they're going to play. Barron has got to be in a specific man-style defense. Morrison needs to be in like a zone coverage style defense, more so. I think position, like for the Packers, it's going to be better for them to go with a Morrison over a guy who's going to be more in a man coverage, which is where I think Barron is more well fit to be.
And that's the reason why I bring it up is because Jahdae Barron has drawn some comps to a Jair Alexander. They run more of a zone scheme in Green Bay, and the zone coverage grades for Jahdae Barron are excellent. I believe that they're the highest on PFF4.
I thought Morrison's were higher.
So zone coverage for Jahdae is 91.8 and Morrison is 67.4 for zone. Morrison, I feel like, is more of the outside man-to-man. He's the closest thing to Will Johnson as far as being able to be put on an island. Those are the two guys I feel like are like island potential style players. But Morrison has the flexibility to go inside and outside, and that Jahdae Barron is more of a nickel style guy that could flex it outside if need be, that he fits more with Jair Alexander. I've seen some people say that like schematically Jahdae Barron fits with the defensive scheme up there, but that they don't think that he's going to mesh well with the defensive coordinator in Green Bay, which I don't have any inkling of thought into that at all. Jahdae Barron's a guy that I've seen mocked to my Vikings. I've seen him mocked to the Packers. I've seen him mocked all around. And he's a guy that I'm slowly growing on and thinking that like he could be a super solid contributor. I just wanted to get your thoughts on Jahdae Barron over Morrison there. But look, I don't like seeing Morrison go to the Packers because I do think that he has the capability of being a super solid cornerback in this league. For those reasons, I hope that his hip isn't good.
Right.
But unless my Vikings were to take him in real life. All right, that brings me to my Minnesota Vikings. My ultimate hope for this pick, obviously, is that we trade down. If you look at the picks that the Vikings have, we have pick 24, 97, 139, and 161. Pick 239 is a mistake. We do not have this pick. The Steelers actually still have this pick. This is from like 2 years ago, and PFF needs to update it. We only have 4 picks right now in this draft.
Ooh.
All right. Our first round pick, a comp pick in the 3rd round, and that's it for the first 2 days. Right. So that's a problem. We need to trade this pick. I think that Kwesi is going to be very willing to trade this pick. However, my fear is that we are not going to see a good return on investment for this because teams know that we're going to be desperate to trade the pick. Either way, we're not trading this pick in the 1st round in our draft because we're not doing trades. And that brings up, what PFF has listed on here for our needs, running back, guard, defensive interior, and cornerback is spot on. Aaron Jones, I don't know if he's going to be back or not. Like we saw Aaron Jones when he was healthy do good things for the Vikings, especially early in the year. And as he was playing through injuries later on in the year, we didn't have the same sort of offensive run production or receiving production out of him. A big part of that, though, other than the injury, goes to the guard play. Our guard play was pretty damn bad. Now, I like Blake Randall on the left side. I think that he is a good value guard there, but the right side is just an absolute fucking mess. The center position is a mess because the guard play around him is not good.
Gonna do it.
Right?
Go get him.
Gray Zabel?
Yeah, go get your boy.
Dude, I want to. I kind of want to. The other guy that I would think of if I'm going interior offensive line here.
There's only one name I'd think of at this time.
Two.
Oh,
There's
really?
Two. Absolutely. Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State and the guard Booker out of
Tyler Booker. Yeah.
Tyler Booker. Which I'm just going to pull these guys up here so that way we can see what we're talking about. All right. So Gray Zabel, obviously, they're the 26th ranked player right now on PFF. And he's continuing to rise after how well he did in the Senior Bowl. He plays all 5 positions at the Senior Bowl. Looks good. I think that he translates better to the interior, but that's a guy that, like, if you have an injury, you can push him out and play a little bit of tackle if you need to, or you could end up being the center long term for us. Like, who knows? Like, he's a guy that I absolutely like. I've talked glowingly, obviously, about him. Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State. This guy is a tackle and a guard. He's being listed as a tackle right now on PFF, but he was your starting guard and then ended up moving out to tackle and looked pretty good through the playoffs, if I'm not incorrect.
Yeah, he's not a bad player at all. Position flexibility. This is high, in my opinion, for him. But
I think it could be high too, but I think because of how he played in the college football playoff, that there's been a little bit more steam about him. The problem is that, like, again, he is a guard who showed that he could play tackle. And if a guy can play tackle in the NFL, he wants to play tackle because it's more money. And so I'm also thinking long-term about this. If we bring him in and start him at guard, but he has aspirations to play tackle, is he going to sign another contract at a guard rate with us when he could go somewhere and get tackle money? I want a player, if I'm taking him in the 1st round, I want this guy to be there for a decade, preferably, if all things work out correctly. So that's my kind of concern there with him. And then you have Tyler Booker here. And look, he is rated lower on PFF. He's the top guard, pure guard, but he's rated lower because PFF knows that the NFL values guards less than that. They normally don't go, pure guards normally don't go in the 1st round. And his grades are okay. But the scuttlebutt around Mobile apparently is that he is just lauded over by teams. that he is the pure, true NFL professional type player. The same way that Will Anderson Jr. was talked about coming out of Alabama, that he was that pure, just like he is an NFL player and he's going to be a stud for years to come. On the defensive side of the ball for Alabama, that's the way Tyler Booker's talked about. He's also 6'5", 325. He can play tackle if you need to. He's got the size for it, even though obviously he is, yes, he is obviously best to be a guard in the NFL. So those would be the areas that I would be looking at if I were going on the offensive line. But I have to do my due diligence, right? We need defensive interior help, and Walter Nolan is staring me right in the face, and I fucking love this dude. Like, he is so quick off the ball. He is an absolute disruptor from what I've watched. Really, really good feet. Looked great in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. But I kind of brought this up with Kenneth Grant when I was talking about, the Vikings might like a guy like Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant plays that nose tackle role really well, which we have Harrison Phillips playing right now. I think Harrison Phillips is playing out of position. I think that he's better as that 3-4 defensive tackle or end. And that would be two positions that you'd be adding if you got a Kenneth Grant in there to play nose tackle, and then you move Harrison Phillips over to that end spot. That would be really good for us. If you bring in a guy like Walter Nolan, I still think that you're obviously getting a stud out there, but I don't know if you have to move Harrison Phillips at all. Like, Harrison Phillips probably still stays in the middle. Nolan takes one of those more end spots.
So that 5 to 7 range.
Yeah, and I'm in on Walter Nolan. I will not be upset at all if we take a Walter Nolan. If we look towards the cornerback position, we brought up Jahdae Barron earlier. I think, look, the Vikings have 3 starting cornerbacks from their roster this year that are not under contract. Stephon Gilmore, you have Byron Murphy Jr., and Shaq Griffin. I don't think Shaq Griffin comes back. I think that Gilmore is considering retirement, and I wouldn't have a problem with bringing him back, but obviously that's not a long-term solution. And Byron Murphy is going to be looking for a much bigger contract. I want to bring him back, but it could be cost prohibitive. We do have guys like Mekhi Blackman that are going to be back, things like that. I saw some good things out of Dwight McClellan last year, so we still should be looking towards cornerback. Jahdae Barron, I'm okay with. Trey Amos, I'm a little bit off on. He had an average Senior Bowl, and I think that he's been average statistically throughout his college career. I'm not as high on him as some people are. Savon Ravel, Ravel, I do really like, but obviously the injury and lower competition is what has dropped him to this point. But he is a ball hawk. This guy is like a ball hawk if he's out there. And so if I were going cornerback here, I probably would be leaning towards Savon Ravel, because I do think that he's a first-round player that has just dropped because of the injury. I'm going to take Gray Zabel, dude. I like the idea of Gray Zabel. Look, the defense, what Brian Flores, Brian Flores is fucking staying. He's staying. He's not going to be going to one of these other teams as a head coach. What Brian Flores has been able to do with this defense and the guys that we currently have has been outstanding. This is a super deep class for defensive linemen. I think that we're going to be able to go out there and find a defensive lineman in round 2 or 3. If we trade back, we'll be able to get one. I think offensively, the biggest question mark that we have outside of who's going to be playing quarterback, which I think it'll be JJ, is that interior offensive line, providing that sort of protection to a young quarterback, or Sam Darnold, if he ends up staying there, is absolutely necessary. You need to shore that position up. Gray Zabel either as your center or your guard long-term in the future. So I'm going Gray Zabel. Defensive back-wise, I think that we got some young guys there that are options. I think that we could be aggressive in free agency as well for like a DJ Reed or something like that. So I am going to be going Gray Zabel, who's listed as a tackle. He's going to be playing either guard or center for us. I love this dude. Keep him up there in the Midwest.
All right, Gray Zabel. It feels like a Vikings pick. Listen, he is a good player. The position flexibility is fantastic. He had a really good week at Senior Day. I think there are still some holes, but the fact that he can move anywhere along the offensive line, you will find a spot for this guy. So I think it's a good pick for a team that needs help on the interior, because you guys could possibly look at him at center as well. Because if you were going to take him there, I was going to take him with the next pick of the Texans, because multiple options there. Now I'm kind of left in a tough spot. It's down to Walter Nolan to help shore up the inside of that defense. Obviously, defensive head coach would really love that. And the pass rush from the interior, saw a huge uptick from him this year. He's always been a really good run defender, but saw good pass rush from him this year as well. But injuries have really kind of hurt that squad, especially at the wide receivers position. Tank Dell being out could potentially be out for a very long time, considering how bad that injury was. And a Luther Burden sitting there who can do very similar things to help get CJ back on the right train is leaving me kind of torn. I'm gonna go with I'm going Nolan. I'm going Nolan here to help continue to build that defense. I know wide receiver is a need and Burden fits that role, but I guess I'm being hopeful that Tank is going to be able to come back and fill that role again that he should fill. So maybe that's a wishful thinking, but I'm gonna go with Walter Nolan here for the Texans.
All right, makes sense to me. Look, I need to step back a little bit and go back to the guy that you selected before for the Chargers in Matthew Golden. One of the comps that I kind of had to him with his size and route running capability is a Stephon Diggs, who is on this Texans roster. If Matthew Golden falls to the Texans, I think that he's a perfect replacement for that Diggs role. And it's not kind of overlapping too much with what Tank Dell can do when he comes back in the future. And it definitely doesn't overcome what Nico Collins can do. And I think that would be a perfect fit. I don't think Luther Burden is a bad fit here either for the Texans because Tank Dell is going to be out. Also, Luther Burden is a very unique type of player where he can do a lot of the, I guess, more gadgety plays, the screens. He can run the ball. Luther Burden has been used in the running back role before out of the backfield, whereas you're not going to do that as much with Tank Dell because of his size. So I don't think that there's a crazy ass to put Luther Burden in there. Walter Nolan obviously is a super solid pick here. I think that he is going to be great for that D'Amico Ryans defense. The other guy that I would have looked at there again is a Tyler Booker because they do need that interior offensive line help. And looking at the guys who are tackles that could convert to guards, I don't like them as much. Obviously, I'm high on Donovan Jackson and what he was able to do. But I think that if they're going for that interior offensive lineman type of fit, it would be a Booker role right there. But I like Nolan there for the Texans. Next up, we have the LA Rams. They have needs at tackle, offensive line. I think it is rich for a guy that is seen a little bit more as a true tackle here. Josh Carnley, I really liked up until the Senior Bowl. I shouldn't focus on that one rep, but the reports are is that he had a decent Senior Bowl, but that one rep really fucking roughed him up that day and got in his head. For his size, being 315, he gets pushed around a little bit too much. The good thing that NFL scouts will like about him is that he will lose reps initially, and then he is able to come back and win them by the end, which is a good thing because you aren't going to win every rep in the NFL. You have to be able to recover from your mess ups, and Connerly has a really good ability to do that. That being said, like I'm still a little bit down on him, what he did. Ariante Ursary from Minnesota is a big body dude that I think can play tackle. I feel like he's more of a right tackle in the NFL, and I still feel like it's a little bit rich for him. I think that he's going to be like late first, early second type of guy being picked. And I don't necessarily like either of those options right now for the Rams. Rams, though, on defense, they looked good by the end of the year on defense, especially in their front seven. They're getting some good stuff out of those early picks like Jared Verse. But they do still need some help in the defensive backfield. I'm going Savon Ravel here at cornerback for them. Ooh. I think that this is a guy that McVay would like. He's that ball hawk type of guy. Remind me, who is the cornerback that they traded for and brought out there who now is playing for the Dolphins?
Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah. I think Savon Ravel can be a Jalen Ramsey type of player for him.
Ooh, that's a big comp.
Absolutely. But look, I think he's that sort of ball hawk type of mentality guy. I think Savon Ravel can do that for him. And so he might not be the most lockdown corner out there, but he's going to be getting you a lot of good plays with turnovers and stuff. So Savon Ravel to the Rams.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. He is a ball hawk. The injury, you worry about how he's going to come back. Hopefully he comes back completely fine. All things good there. But when we switched spots, so you could pick for the Vikings, we never had you double up to switch back. So I'm on odds and you're on even. So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to take this one here. That way I don't pick for the Ravens because I would absolutely not be picking Luther Burden for the Ravens. However, it's probably where you're going to go because it makes a lot of sense considering what they need. So, Evo, you are still on the clock with the Ravens
Yeah.
at pick 27.
And look, Luther Burden does make a bunch of sense here, right? Like
Yeah.
I like the look, there's some overlap there in the wide receiver room, but nothing too crazy that having a Luther Burden wouldn't be helpful with. Lamar Jackson being able to run the ball, Derrick Henry being able to run the ball. You got a Luther Burden that can run the ball, also be a little bit more of a gadgety guy there. Like that's a scary combo to have. That being said, I'm still scared about this defensive backfield. They looked better in the, latter part of the year. But at cornerback, like I'm still a little bit scared for them. I don't think that they have everything they need. Also, the Ravens are known for just like grabbing dudes that are edge rushers and constantly having fucking awesome talent along that defensive line, those edge rushers, which makes me think like a Shamar Stewart here would be their type of guy. Or even maybe like a Nick Scorton, who we haven't talked about yet. I think Nick Scorton is slept on a little bit. Some of these other names have become more flashy, but Scorton, I think, is a first round talent that hasn't been talked about as an edge rusher. I'm going to go Jahdae Barron. I'm going to lean into that. I think that Jahdae Barron is a solid cornerback. I think that he will help shore up that defensive backfield a little bit for this Ravens team. Yeah, Burden's there at wide receiver. I feel like they're going to lean towards their defensive side and get back to their roots of being a super solid defensive team. They're going to go after a defender. Shamar Stewart would be my next guy that I would take there for him, but Jahdae Barron at cornerback for the Ravens is my guy.
All right. Jahdae Barron there. That's a fun pick. I hate it because, I mean, every time the Ravens are getting better, I hate it. It's not one of those moves where it's like, okay, I can see how we could beat this guy. He's going to be a good player in this league for sure. But that's going to take us on to the Lions, who I'm in a tough spot here. They need offensive line help. The offensive line at this point, I mean, I could go look interior offensive line at Tyler Booker. Edge defender, though, they needed some help. Once I just forgot his name. Once their pass rusher just went down.
Aiden Hutchinson.
Thank you, Aiden Hutchinson. Once Aiden Hutchinson went down, they struggled. So they could probably use another guy, especially to pair with Aiden Hutchinson as he comes back. I'm not a Shamar Stewart guy. I don't like his ability to rush the passer. Jack Sawyer, I like, but I worry that Jack is not going to be a guy that you want with his hand in the dirt all the time. Seems more like a wide 9 guy, TJ Watt style of rusher. That could be a really good fit for Jack Sawyer. I don't know if that's going to fit up there with the Lions. You brought up Nick Scorton. Not bad, but a guy that had a really good week down in Mobile that I think is going to continue to climb up boards. Donovan, and I'm going to fuck his last name up, Izarukui.
Izarako.
Right? Izarako. Okay, so don't pronounce all the vowels. This kid generated a shitload of pass rush at Boston College, had an exceptional week, seen by a ton of scouts, is projected to potentially slide up into that first round. I think that could happen here. I'm going with Donovan. Give me his last name one more time.
Izaraku
to the Lions at 28.
All righty. Yeah, he's a guy that definitely showed up and showed out at the Senior Bowl. My fear with him is that if he's going to be a hand in the dirt edge rusher or if he's going to be a stand-up guy. I think he's better as a stand-up guy. Hand in the dirt, he's a little bit small for that. He's going to kind of get washed out in run defense. You're looking at a guy who's 6'2", and 240. He's more that linebacker size or that stand-up edge rusher. But his production, especially in the Senior Bowl, outstanding. Really, really good there. A couple other names there, as far as edge rush talent, a guy who gets kind of slept on, Princely Umami-Ellen, looks like he has a spin move that is in slow motion, but it works like every fucking time. And I don't know how. And my gut tells me that he's that type of Dan Campbell type of player. So he's a name to kind of watch there. Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart, I think, are both super solid options. They're the larger defensive end type of guys who are good against the run, but also can generate some pass rush. Shamar Stewart is the one that I believe he also, with Mike Green, like left because they looked so fucking good initially. His pass rush win rate isn't as big as some of these other edge rushers.
He's never put up numbers either, man. Like, I don't know why everybody's so. Listen, I'm sure he's going to be a quality player. I don't want to bury this young man, but I just do not see how he is a productive edge rusher. Like, he seems like he should be a 3-4 D end more than anything. He is not a guy that I think is going to rush the passer all the time.
So you see here, he's listed at 290. He put on like 20 something pounds of weight this year. And the thought process is that A&M, their pass rushers haven't been asked to be like true pass rushers. They're like the clog up type of players that allow the linebackers and stuff to get home. If he were to drop back down a little bit to keep that speed and be asked to be that true pass rusher, I think that he can kind of be one of those scary guys. I brought him up earlier, but Robinson, who I was a big fan of last year, I was taken by the Cardinals, how he has that kind of end to, tackle flexibility along a defensive line, depending on his weight and what they ask of him. I see a lot of that in Shamar Stewart, and I think that Shamar Stewart's going to kind of be another one of those guys that continues to rise based on what a team wants him to do. If they want him to cut a little bit and get a little bit faster or not. And then Nick Scorton, I think, is going into this year, he was considered like a top 5 defensive end, and just didn't have that same sort of production. But again, he was one of those guys that wasn't asked. It seems like A&M didn't ask their guys to do what you're expecting out of a traditional pass rusher in the NFL, despite having a really good pass rush win rate there, and being solid against the run as well. So I think any of those guys are good options. Ezaraku is, again, like, I think he's a little small to be hand in the dirt, but we've seen dudes that are a little bit smaller be extremely dominant. And at the end of the day, Dan Campbell's going to be knowing what type of guy he's getting, what type of guy fits for his team. He'll get the most out of him. Washington Commanders, look, they could use some help on the defense. I think that the defensive side of the ball is, they've got older players there. They could use some more edge rush help. Any of those guys I just mentioned, Shamar Stewart or Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton, both make a lot of sense here. I really want to take Luther Burden to give another fucking super
especially
scary
on the inside, working out of the slot. When you got Scary Terry working on the edge.
We saw De'Ami Brown start to actually look a little bit better towards the end of the year as well. Yeah. And then a Luther Burden, that's a scary combo to me. I really want to do it because I know if I don't do it here, that like the Bills are definitely an option there. I know what your thoughts about the Bills are like. Josh Allen doesn't need that extra.
I don't think Luther Burden is a guy that is a supreme number 1 talent option, though. Like, he's a very good piece to an offense.
I think that him and Khalil Shakir could do some fun things, especially in the middle of the field, if he were to fall there.
But it doesn't sound like he is.
I don't know. He might. I think that the true play here, Dan Quinn's got to continue to reload on this defense. I'm going Shamar Stewart. I'm a fan of him. I'm going Shamar Stewart here for Dan Quinn, and this defense get younger, get some better pass rush help there. Even though Luther Burden was on the tip of the tongue, even when I was looking at the Ravens, I was thinking down the line, I was like, I think Burden could go here to Washington. But we'll go with Shamar Stewart for all the reasons that I brought up earlier. I think that he could be a good fit there for him.
All right. Man. Okay. So I've talked about it. I'm not a big Shamar guy, but I understand why you would go in that direction. I think a wide receiver right there would be a lot of fun for Jaden Daniels. Yeah, especially if the Luther Burden is there. But here's the thing: Luther Burden's not coming off the board here either, because while I think that he and Shakir can do some fun things, I think they are very similar in some of the stuff that they already kind of do. But defensive line, we saw in that AFC or in the AFC Championship game, they kind of got moved around a little bit. They got the ball run on them a little bit. I think that Tyleik Williams still being here right here late at the end of the first round is going to be really good for some of these teams that are already really fucking good. Tyreek Williams going and kind of plugging up the middle of that Bills defense. I like that for them. So that's where I'm going to go. I'm going Tyreek Williams and trying not to be a homer pick here with taking another Ohio State guy. But I feel like he fits kind of what they would need to do to help build that team. They have got to they got to have more help for Josh. Even when Josh makes plays, something else happens. Build the team around Josh. Build something else around Josh.
Look, and I've seen defensive interior go a lot here to the Bills, and we've had Tyreek Williams go off the board, Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, and obviously Mason Graham. Mason Graham's up there on his own, but those next three guys, including Tyreek Williams, are all interchangeable. Like, it depends on the scheme, it depends on how people view them, but they're all relatively close together as far as how they're viewed draft position wise. So Tyreek Williams going here, he easily could have gone 10 picks higher. Like, I like him a lot. I think he's a good penetrator, good defensive tackle, and that's something that the Bills definitely do need. He's a bigger boy, which will be good to kind of help lock down that middle of the field. All right, Eagles are getting pick 31 according to PFF, but we don't know if they're picking 31 or 32 yet.
That's correct.
So apparently PFF is favoring Patrick Mahomes, the officiating and the NFL's script, if you believe that. I don't. That the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl and the Eagles are going to be picking at 31. Wide receiver continually gets listed for the Eagles year in, year out, and I don't
understand why.
You got Devontae Smith, you got AJ Brown, you've got some decent tight end options there. It seems like, and they're a running team now. They got Saquon. Saquon's not going away, right?
Correct.
So, they could use some extra edge rush there on the defense. Guys like a Jack Sawyer makes sense. Let's see who else we still have available here on the edge. Scorton obviously makes a lot of sense. Landon Jackson, I've sent to the Eagles a couple times because for whatever reason, my gut tells me he's an Eagles type of guy. I think a lot of this is going to be whether or not they can retain Zach Bond or not as well.
Right.
That's going to be important for them. But the bread and butter of this team is how they operate on the offense, running the ball, the tush push, all that stuff. And I'm going Tyler Booker here.
Okay. Wow. All right.
Tyler Booker, I think they're just going to continue feeding into their bread and butter, what they do well. Tyler Booker, outstanding interior offensive lineman. And they're going to continue having that awesome offensive line. So that way, even if the defense falls off a little bit, that offense should be absolutely productive week in, week out, whether they decide to run the ball or pass it.
Okay. So best pure guard and best pure interior guy in this draft, and Tyler Booker. That it is the MO of the Eagles. Like, let's go ahead and continue to build the offensive, defensive lines. Saquon Barkley being there, they run it right down your throat. And Booker's a guy that's really good in the run game as well. So I really like that pick, especially here late in the first round. We're starting to see that influx. Those interior guys are becoming more important. Power running football is becoming more important. Everybody got skinny. Everybody got fast so they could run sideline to sideline to keep up with all the passing. Well, now we're converting back. We're running the ball between the tackles and we're smacking people in the mouth. So we need some big boys to go ahead and do that. Defenders are going to need to start getting bigger too.
And look, you look at the last part of this draft, the teams that are good, what do? They try to build the trenches. You look at all these picks minus the cornerbacks there. They're in the trenches. Good teams build through the trenches and they find the other guys later. That's why these teams are consistently picking towards the end of the draft.
I 100% agree, which is going to take us to the last pick of the draft. They're saying it's the Chiefs. We don't know, but needs here listed: tackle, D-line, linebacker. So yeah, all of those things are needed. Every single one of those things is needed for the Chiefs. But they have been massively in flux at wide receiver since they traded away Tyreek Hill. Luther Burden is a fucking Swiss Army knife. I would hate to see in an Andy Reid offense. But goddamn, would it be exciting to see what Andy Reid can do with a Luther Burden in his offense? It would be insane. And because he's still here, that's where I have to go. I know that there are other needs, but this is just a slam dunk of a pick.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like, he doesn't take over the Rashee Rice role, and I think all the other receivers on that team that none of them have a lockdown spot. Hollywood Brown is the closest, but Hollywood Brown still doesn't have a lockdown spot. That's Luther Burden makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. All right, man. That's it. That wraps up the mock draft 1.0. Some slight technical difficulties. I'm gonna have to figure out what the fuck happened to all my stuff over here after this is over. But hey, we made it work. We made it through. Appreciate you vamping in the middle when I had to, go do my business and all of this shit went down.
Yep. Not a problem. Look, I love doing mock drafts. We were able to get almost 2.5 hours in here,
Yeah.
like that's mock drafts can take a little while, especially when you start talking about it. I get fired up for them. So I love going into mock drafts.
As do I. Appreciate you, Vanilla Gorilla Eats. We're going to have another mock draft 2.0 coming up. That one probably won't be live. We're going to add a little extra production value, hopefully, assuming that this doesn't fucking crash on me mid recording. But we got some player cards. We got some fun stuff coming up. We got a lot of draft talk to go over. But before that, we're going to have the Super Bowl. Evo, we got to come up with a plan on when we're doing our Super Bowl show so we can give the people all of our bets for the Super Bowl, as well as any of the fun prop bets. I know that's what a lot of the people that watch us on the Super Bowl, that's what they love. Producer Amber, I think that's one of her favorite segments is prop bets. But man, we got a busy week. NFL wraps up this week. Super Bowl coming up. Super Bowl licks, as Gronk would pronounce it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the whole Roman numerals don't make a whole lot of sense to Gronk. They don't make a ton of sense to me either. I just like numbers, but
numbers would be easier.
I get it. Yeah.
All right, brother. Do you got anything else that we got to get out before we wrap this whole thing up?
No, I'm happy. I'm happy with how the draft turned out. I think obviously these players are going to move up and down a little bit, and there's still several good players that were not selected that I think are first round caliber. That'll be nice gets for that second round. I like the way that it turned out. I think it's relatively realistic and that we did a decent job for 1.0 before the NFL season is even done.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? That's pretty impressive because we'll get some wild shit at some point. I guarantee it. We're going to do a lot of mock drafts over the summer, over this winter, whatever the fuck time of year it is, over the summer. God, it's a long off season when you think about how long we'll be doing mock drafts and talk all of that. But to everybody tuning in, thank you very much. One last time, if you would not mind, before you pop out of here, head on over to our YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. We are on a push to get to our 1,000 subscriber mark. But my man, that's all I got. We'll get our first mock draft pushed out. We will also announce when we are going live for the Super Bowl week. But with that, we're going to get the fuck out of here. I am Mike. That is Evo. You can interact with us anywhere down below, X, Facebook, TikTok, the call line, which, by the way, if you did call in, that all shut down when my computer took a shit as well. And then lastly, but certainly not least, that YouTube. Please head on over there, like, share, and subscribe. But with that, we're going to get the fuck out of here. Evo, give the people one last word.
Happy draft season. It is on us.
Happy draft season, everybody. Thank you guys very much from the bottom of our hearts. Anytime you spend some time with us, we are forever grateful because it is the most precious commodity that you have. I'm Mike. That's Evo. This is the Lineman Lounge. See you.